When three security guards cornered a woman saying no in a five-star hotel lobby, while VIP guests sipped champagne and looked away. Nobody expected the exhausted single dad in the worn jacket to become the most dangerous man in the room. Gavin Hart had buried his Black Ops past to raise his daughter in peace. But some lines, once crossed, demand an answer. What happened next went viral for all the right reasons, and reminded the world that the wrong man is sometimes exactly who you need. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The Aurelia Grand Hotel didn't just welcome wealth, it worshipped it. Every surface gleamed with the kind of polish that whispered money, from the Italian marble floors that caught the light like frozen water to the crystal chandeliers that hung overhead like captured constellations. The air itself seemed expensive, perfumed with imported lilies and the particular scent of privilege, leather, champagne, and the quiet confidence of people who'd never been told no in their lives. Gavin Hart didn't belong here, and he knew it. He stood near the reception desk, one hand resting protectively on his daughter's shoulder, the other clutching a worn leather folder containing a fire safety maintenance contract that represented 2 months of work. His jacket, clean but faded at the elbows, hung on a frame that had once carried military precision, but now just carried tired. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, the kind that came from too many late nights checking homework after 12-hour shifts, from being both mother and father to a girl who deserved better than what loss had given her. Mia sat beside him on one of the lobby's ornate chairs, her legs swinging several inches above the floor. At 10 years old, she'd learned to make herself small in spaces like this, to fold into herself the way she folded the paper cranes that currently occupied her hands. Her fingers moved with practiced efficiency, creasing and tucking a square of origami paper, bright yellow this time, into wings and a neck and a tail that would never fly but somehow still promised elevation. She'd made 3 already this morning. One sat on the reception desk, ignored. One peeked from her backpack, and now she was working on the one that mattered most. "Almost done," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Gavin watched her work, his heart doing that thing it did whenever he saw how much of her mother lived in her careful hands. Sarah had folded cranes too, back when. Before the cancer, before the medical bills that still arrived like monthly ghost, before he'd traded his security consulting firm for contract maintenance work that paid the rent but not much else. Mia finished her crane with a final crisp fold and held it up to the light, examining it with an artist's critical eye. Satisfied, she reached up and tucked it gently into Gavin's jacket pocket, patting it twice. "There," she said softly. "If the crane stays safe, you stay safe." It was their ritual, born from a child's logic that seemed to believe paper and promises could protect the people she loved. Gavin had learned not to argue with it. After losing her mother, Mia needed her small certainties, her daily magics, and if he was honest, so did he. "Thank you, sweetheart," he said, his voice rough with the kind of gratitude that had nothing to do with origami and everything to do with the miracle of her still trusting the world enough to try protecting it. The woman behind the reception desk, nameplate reading Clarissa, uniform so crisp it could cut, looked up from her computer with the expression of someone who'd just discovered something unfortunate on her shoe. "Mr. Hart," she said, his name somehow becoming 2 words of judgment. "Mr. Westmore will see you, eventually. He's currently attending to our VIP guests." Her eyes flicked to Mia, then to Gavin's jacket, cataloging and dismissing in the same glance. "You'll need to wait." "That's fine," Gavin said evenly. "We're early anyway." Clarissa's smile was the kind that never reached her eyes. "Indeed. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in the contractor waiting area, down the service hallway, through the kitchen entrance. We're fine here, thank you." Something flickered across her face, surprise that he'd declined her attempt to relocate them out of sight, maybe irritation that he hadn't recognized the suggestion for what it was. A command wrapped in courtesy. But she only nodded and returned to her screen, typing with sharp, deliberate clicks that sounded vaguely accusatory. The lobby continued its performance of elegant living around them. A couple in matching designer sunglasses glided past, trailing the scent of expensive cologne. Business people in suits that cost more than Gavin's monthly rent gathered near the bar, their laughter the comfortable kind that came from knowing the tab didn't matter. A woman with perfectly coiffed silver hair walked a small dog wearing a collar that probably had actual diamonds. Gavin felt Mia lean closer against his leg. "Dad?" she whispered. "That lady keeps looking at us." He followed his daughter's gaze to a woman perched on one of the lobby's velvet settees, her face pinched with the kind of displeasure usually reserved for spoiled food. She was staring at them over the rim of her champagne flute, not even bothering to hide it. "It's okay," Gavin murmured. "Some people just forget their manners in fancy places." But the woman, clearly emboldened by Gavin's notice, leaned toward her companion, a portly man whose watch glittered with unnecessary complications, and said something behind her hand. Both of them laughed, their eyes cutting back toward Gavin and Mia like knives looking for soft places to land. Gavin's jaw tightened, but he'd learned long ago that some battles weren't worth fighting. Pride was expensive, and he was saving his resources for things that mattered. "Why don't you make another crane?" he suggested to Mia, keeping his voice light. "Maybe a blue one this time?" She nodded and pulled another sheet from her backpack, but her hands weren't as steady now. She'd heard the laughter too, even if she didn't understand exactly what it meant. But children always knew when they were being made into jokes. 15 minutes passed. The lobby filled with more guests, more laughter, more casual displays of wealth that felt increasingly like a staged performance. Gavin checked his watch, a simple Timex that had survived 2 deployments and now marked time in parent-teacher conferences and contract meetings. Still 10 minutes until his appointment. "Mr. Hart?" He turned to find a man approaching, dressed in the hotel's management uniform, charcoal suit, burgundy tie, a smile that didn't quite commit to genuine warmth. His nameplate read Derek Westmore, Senior Manager. "That's me," Gavin said, starting to rise. Westmore held up a hand. "No need to get up. I just wanted to let you know we're running a bit behind schedule. VIP situation, you understand. Might be another 30 minutes or so." Gavin glanced at his watch again. "My appointment was for 10:30. I rearranged my whole morning." "Yes, well, priorities shift in the hospitality industry." Westmore's smile never wavered, but something cold moved behind it. "I'm sure you understand. A man in your position must be used to flexibility." The emphasis on position wasn't subtle. Gavin felt Mia's hand slip into his, her small fingers curling tight. 30 minutes, Gavin said quietly. "Then I'll need to reschedule. I have other commitments." Of course. Westmore's eyes drifted to Mia, and something dismissive flickered across his face. "Though perhaps next time, Mr. Hart, you might consider arranging childcare. The Aurelia isn't really set up for children. We cater to a particular clientele, and they expect a certain atmosphere." Heat flashed through Gavin's chest, but he breathed through it, counted to 3 the way his therapist had taught him. "My daughter is perfectly well behaved. She's not disturbing anyone." "I'm sure," Westmore said, in a tone that meant the opposite. Still, for future reference, he let the sentence hang, already turning away. Gavin watched him go, his free hand curling into a fist before he consciously relaxed it. Beside him, Mia had gone very still, her crane half folded in her lap. "Am I being bad?" she whispered. The question hit him like a physical thing. "No, baby. No, you're being perfect. He's just..." Gavin struggled for words that wouldn't poison her view of the world more than it already had been. "He's just having a bad day. It's not about you." But they both knew it was. It was about her worn sneakers and his faded jacket, about not belonging in a place that measured worth in thread count and annual income. It was about being visible in all the wrong ways. Mia nodded and returned to her folding, but her movements had lost their earlier grace. The crane fought her, refused to take shape properly. She started over, once, twice. On the 3rd attempt, the paper tore. "It's okay," Gavin murmured, fishing another sheet from her backpack. "Try again. You've got this." But before she could smooth the fresh paper, a voice cut through the lobby's ambient murmur like glass breaking. "Is that man actually conducting business in our lobby?" The woman from the settee had risen, champagne flute in hand like a weapon, addressing Clarissa at the reception desk, but pitching her voice loud enough to carry. "I'm paying $2,500 a night for the executive suite, and there's some contractor Camped out with his child like we're a public waiting room? Clarissa's expression flickered between embarrassment and calculation. Ma'am, I assure you, Mr. Hart has an appointment. I don't care what he has. This is the Aurelia Grand Hotel, not a bus station. The woman's companion had joined her now, along with two other well-dressed guests who'd caught the scent of spectacle. Look at him. Look at that jacket, those shoes. He looks like he wandered in from a homeless shelter. The lobby's background noise dimmed as conversations paused, heads turning toward the developing scene. Gavin felt every eye land on him like weights, felt Mia shrink against his side. We have an appointment, he said, keeping his voice level, even as anger built like pressure behind his ribs. We're just waiting our turn. The portly man with the expensive watch laughed, a sound like stones rattling in a can. Your turn? Listen, buddy, places like this don't take turns. They take people who matter. He gestured broadly at Gavin's clothes, at Mia's backpack with its peeling stickers. And no offense, but you're bringing down the whole atmosphere here, making the regular guests uncomfortable. We're not bothering anyone, Gavin said, but his words felt thin against the growing audience, against the way people were edging closer like spectators at an accident. Your kid's littering paper all over the furniture, the woman snapped, pointing at a crane Mia had set on the chair beside her. This isn't a daycare center. If you can't afford a babysitter, maybe you can't afford to be doing business here in the first place. Mia made a small sound, something between a whimper and a gasp. Gavin felt her hands trembling where they gripped his sleeve. That's enough, he said, and something in his voice made the woman pause. It was quiet, that voice, but it carried the weight of authority, of a man who'd once commanded rooms full of armed professionals and hadn't forgotten how. You can insult me all you want, but my daughter is off limits. The woman's face flushed red. Don't you dare tell me what's enough. Derek! She called for the manager, who'd been hovering near the bar, but now approached with visible reluctance. Derek, this man is being aggressive. I want him removed from the premises immediately. Westmore's eyes darted between the angry VIP guests and Gavin, calculations running visible behind his professional mask. Money talked, and the woman in the designer dress spoke volumes more than a maintenance contractor ever could. Mr. Hart, Westmore said carefully, perhaps we should reschedule your appointment for a day when... When what? Gavin interrupted, his patience finally cracking. When I look richer? When I don't have my daughter with me? When I'm more convenient for your VIP guests to ignore? Dad, Mia whispered, tugging his sleeve. Can we just go, please? The plea in her voice almost broke him. She'd learned too young that sometimes retreat was the only option, that some battles couldn't be won by people like them. It was a lesson he hated teaching her, but the world kept reinforcing it anyway. But before Gavin could respond, a new voice entered the mix, deep, aggressive, coming from the VIP section of the lobby, where leather chairs and private tables created islands of exclusivity. What's the problem here? 3 men in security uniforms were approaching, but these weren't hotel staff. Their clothes were too tactical, too military grade. Private security, Gavin recognized immediately, probably hired by one of the high-profile guests. The lead guard was broad-shouldered and thick-necked, with the kind of swagger that came from years of being the biggest threat in any room. No problem, Westmore said quickly, his professional smile straining. Just a scheduling misunderstanding. Looks like more than that to me, the guard said, his eyes fixed on Gavin with the kind of assessment Gavin knew too well. Fighter to fighter, predator to prey. Looks like someone's making our clients uncomfortable. Someone who doesn't know his place. The other 2 guards flanked their leader, forming a wall of muscle and implied violence. One of them had his hand resting casually on the expandable baton at his belt, fingers drumming like he was hoping for an excuse. Gavin stayed perfectly still, reading the situation with senses honed by years of knowing when rooms were about to turn violent. These men wanted a confrontation. They were practically vibrating with the anticipation of it, probably bored from days of standing around watching rich people drink. I have an appointment, Gavin repeated, but he was already gathering Mia's backpack, already preparing to leave. Because men like this didn't care about appointments or contracts or who was right. They cared about dominance, about putting people in their place, and Gavin had a daughter to protect. Dad, your crane, Mia whispered, reaching toward his pocket where the yellow paper bird sat tucked against his heart. It's safe, baby. I'm safe. Let's just... But then something else caught his attention, pulled his focus past the guards and the gathering crowd toward the VIP section they'd emerged from. There, partially hidden behind a marble column, a woman in a black dress was pressed against the wall. Another security guard, this one wearing the hotel's uniform, but with eyes that held the same predatory gleam, stood too close to her, his arm braced above her shoulder, blocking her exit. The woman's body language screamed discomfort, arms crossed, shoulders hunched, head turned away. As Gavin watched, she said something. He couldn't hear it from this distance, but her lips formed a clear word. No. The guard leaned closer instead of backing away. And around them, the lobby continued its performance of elegant indifference. Guests sipped drinks. Staff polished silver. The camera's position throughout the space seemed to be angled just wrong, somehow missing that particular corner. The exit sign nearest to the woman flickered, its emergency lighting disabled. This wasn't random. This was planned. Gavin's combat instincts fired, reading the scene with brutal clarity. Isolated target, blocked exits, compromised security, witnesses who wouldn't testify. He'd seen it 100 times in 100 hostile situations, and he recognized a predator's trap when he saw one. The woman tried to step sideways, to slip past the guard's arm. He moved with her, casual as a dance, trapping her more completely. Her hand came up, pushing gently at his chest, a clear boundary, clearly violated. She said no again. Gavin could read her lips even if he couldn't hear her voice. The guard smiled. Dad? Mia's voice seemed to come from very far away. What's wrong? Everything, Gavin wanted to say. Everything is wrong with a world where a woman can say no in a crowded room and have every single person look away. The lead guard from the VIP section stepped closer to Gavin, his bulk deliberately intimidating. You got a problem, buddy. See something you shouldn't be seeing? Gavin's eyes cut from the woman to the guard, then back again. Every tactical bone in his body was screaming warnings. 3 armed guards in front of him, one cornering a woman behind him, a daughter at his side who needed him to walk away. The smart play was obvious, but there were some lines that, once you saw them being crossed, you couldn't pretend you didn't see. Yeah, Gavin said quietly, his voice dropping into a register that made the lead guard's smile falter. I see something I shouldn't be seeing. I see a woman saying no, and I see a man who thinks that doesn't matter. The lobby's ambient noise seemed to drop several decibels. Phones started rising, people sensing drama, already framing shots for social media. The woman on the settee gasped with delicious scandal. Westmore's professional mask cracked completely, revealing panic underneath. Sir, the manager said quickly, you really need to leave, now, before this becomes a situation. It's already a situation, Gavin said, not moving, not looking away from the guard. Question is whether you're going to do your job and handle it, or whether I'm going to have to. The lead guard's face split into a grin that held no humor whatsoever. You're going to handle it. He looked back at his companions, inviting them to share the joke. Boys, I think we got ourselves a hero. Bet he thinks he's some kind of tough guy. I think your friend over there needs to take 3 steps back from that woman, Gavin said, his voice still quiet but carrying the kind of certainty that made people nervous. I think she's said no twice, and I think everyone in this lobby heard it. And I think if he doesn't move right now, we're going to have a different kind of problem. Mia's hand tightened on his sleeve. Dad, please, let's just go. He wanted to. God, every part of him that had learned to survive by picking battles carefully wanted to scoop up his daughter and walk out those gleaming doors and never look back. But then the woman in the black dress looked up, and their eyes met across the lobby, and he saw fear there. Not panic, not hysteria, but the cold, tired fear of someone who'd been counting on someone, anyone, to see what was happening, and had been disappointed too many times to expect help. She was on her own, and she knew it. Just like Mia would be someday, in some lobby or parking lot or office, saying no and hoping someone would hear it, hoping someone would care. Gavin had been a lot of things in his life. Special operations tactical specialist, security consultant, single father, contractor barely making rent. but he'd never been the kind of man who could watch someone beg for help and pretend he didn't see. "Mia," he said gently, crouching down to her level, his hands steady on her shoulders. "I need you to go sit by the front desk. Stay with Clarissa. Don't move until I come get you, okay? Dad? I'll be right there. 2 minutes, but I need you safe first. Please, baby." Her eyes were huge, frightened, but she nodded. She understood. She'd always understood too much, too young. As Mia walked toward the reception desk, Clarissa having the grace to look uncomfortable as she made space for the girl, Gavin stood and faced the 3 guards. Then he reached up and slowly, deliberately, began rolling up his right sleeve. "Last chance," he said quietly. "Tell your friend to back away from the woman. Walk away. Nobody gets hurt. Nobody gets famous on social media for the wrong reasons. Easy choice." The lead guard's grin widened. "Wrong man to threaten, buddy. You have any idea who we work for? Any idea what we can do to you?" "Probably not as good as you think," Gavin said, still rolling his sleeve, revealing his forearm inch by inch. "But here's what I know. I know that woman said no. I know you heard it. I know everyone in this lobby heard it. And I know that what happens in the next 30 seconds is going to depend entirely on whether you're as smart as you think you are or as dumb as you look." The guard's face flushed red. Around them, phones were definitely recording now, little lights blinking like eyes in the gathering crowd. This was going to be everywhere. Hotel manager's nightmare, social media gold. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," the guard growled, stepping forward, his companions moving with him. And that's when Gavin's sleeve came up all the way, revealing what lay beneath, a lattice of scars, burn marks arranged in a pattern that anyone with military experience would recognize. And there, on his inner forearm, a tattoo that made the lead guard freeze mid-step. It was simple, a black phoenix rising from flames, wings spread, but surrounded by a specific arrangement of stars and a numerical sequence. Unit identification, the kind that didn't officially exist, from operations that had never officially happened. The Nightfall Protocol. Ghost operations. Black sites and classified missions that ended in fires hot enough to erase records and identities. Everyone believed they'd all died. Everyone believed the program had been terminated. The lead guard's eyes went wide, and Gavin saw the exact moment recognition hit, saw the sudden recalculation of threat assessment, saw swagger transform into uncertainty. That's not possible," the guard whispered. "They're all dead. You can't be—" "Wrong man," Gavin said softly, the phrase carrying an entirely different weight now. "You were right about that. I'm exactly the wrong man for you to have fucked with today." The lobby had gone silent. Even the woman on the settee had stopped mid-sip, champagne frozen halfway to her lips. Westmore looked like he might faint. And still phones recorded, capturing everything, broadcasting it to thousands, soon to be millions. Behind the guards, the woman in the black dress used the distraction to slip free, stumbling toward the main lobby, her face pale but determined. The hotel guard who'd been cornering her started to follow, then stopped when he realized all eyes and all cameras were now on the scene. "Let her go," Gavin said, not a request. "All of you, step back. Let her walk." "You don't give orders here," the lead guard tried, but his voice lacked conviction now. He'd seen the tattoo. He knew what it meant. And more importantly, he knew that men who carried that particular mark had been trained to end threats with whatever was at hand in whatever way worked, by whatever means necessary. Gavin's eyes flicked around the lobby, cataloging. Marble ashtray on the side table, heavy glass, decorative fountain pen on the reception desk, steel, champagne bottle on the bar, perfect weight distribution, the guard's own weapons, accessible if needed. He could end this in 4 moves, maybe 3 if they were as poorly trained as they seemed. But ending wasn't the goal. Teaching was. "I'm giving you a choice," Gavin said, his voice carrying that same quiet authority that had once commanded teams in hostile territories. "You can walk away right now, let that woman go, and we all forget this happened. Or you can make this into something it doesn't need to be. Something that ends with you on the ground and me explaining to police why 3 armed security guards couldn't handle 1 tired contractor with a maintenance contract." The lead guard's hand drifted toward his baton. "There's 3 of us and 1 of you. You really want to try those odds?" "I've had worse," Gavin said simply. And it was true. He'd been 1 against 15 in Baghdad, 1 against 9 in a black site outside Kandahar, 1 against a room full of armed hostiles in a place that didn't have a name on any map. He'd walked out of all of them. The guard's fingers touched the baton, and Gavin saw the decision crystallize, saw the moment stupidity overcame survival instinct. The man was going to swing. His companions were already shifting their weight, already preparing to rush in, and Gavin was already moving. What happened next took approximately 4.3 seconds, though witnesses would later swear it happened both faster and slower. Time seeming to stretch and compress like reality couldn't quite decide what it had witnessed. The lead guard drew his baton, a telescoping weapon that extended with a sharp snick. He swung high, aiming for Gavin's head, sloppy, emotional, telegraphed by the anger in his eyes a full second before his arm moved. Gavin stepped inside the swing's arc, his left hand coming up to catch the guard's wrist, redirecting momentum with minimal force, using the man's own commitment against him. The baton whistled through empty air where Gavin's head had been. Before the guard could reset, Gavin's right hand shot out, 2 fingers striking a precise nerve cluster in the man's forearm. The baton clattered to the marble floor. The guard's hand went numb, fingers suddenly unable to grip. "Controlled striking," Gavin said quietly, maintaining his grip on the man's wrist. "Minimal damage, maximum effect. You should try it sometime." The second guard rushed in from the right, thinking to tackle Gavin low. Poor training, worse instincts. Gavin pivoted, using the lead guard's body as a fulcrum, redirecting the second man's momentum into his companion. They collided with a satisfying thump, stumbling into each other. The third guard had slightly better sense. He hung back, reaching for his radio, probably calling for backup. Gavin didn't give him time. He released the lead guard, letting him stumble into his friend, and crossed the distance to the third guard in 3 quick steps. The heavy glass ashtray from the side table was in Gavin's hand before the guard's thumb found his radio button. 1 precise strike to the radio itself, not the guard's hand, not his body, shattered the device into plastic fragments. "Sorry," Gavin said, genuinely meaning it. "Can't have you call in friends. This needs to stay contained." The guard swung at him, a wide haymaker that had power but no technique. Gavin ducked under it, came up inside the man's guard, and applied pressure to 3 specific points: wrist, elbow, shoulder. The guard's arm twisted, not violently, not with breaking force, just enough to put him off balance and into a position where continued resistance meant either compliance or dislocation. "Choose carefully," Gavin advised. The guard chose compliance, sinking to his knees as Gavin guided him down with steady, controlled pressure. Behind him, the lead guard had recovered enough to charge again, this time with his companion. They came together, trying to use numbers and mass to overwhelm him. Gavin sidestepped, grabbed the decorative fountain pen from the reception desk, Clarissa gasping as he plucked it from right in front of her, and used it as a pressure point tool, jabbing precise locations on both guards that sent their nervous systems into temporary rebellion. Not the eyes, not the throat, nothing that caused lasting damage, just nerve clusters that, when properly manipulated, turned muscle control into suggestion rather than command. Both men stumbled, their legs suddenly unreliable. One caught himself on a chair. The other dropped entirely, catching his fall with hands that still worked even if his legs didn't. The whole thing had taken less than 5 seconds. Gavin stood in the center of 3 incapacitated guards, breathing steady, not even winded. Around him, the lobby had transformed into a forest of phones, every device recording, every witness's jaw hanging open. The woman on the settee had dropped her champagne flute. It shattered on the marble, but nobody noticed. Westmore was backing away slowly, his face the color of old paper. And Mia stood by the reception desk, her hands pressed to her mouth, her eyes huge. Gavin met her gaze and tried to smile reassuringly, but he knew what she was seeing, the father she knew, and someone else, someone harder. Someone who moved like violence was a second language he'd never entirely forgotten. "It's okay, baby," he started to say. But then the hotel guard who'd been cornering the woman in the black dress, emboldened by stupidity or misplaced loyalty, rushed forward with a taser crackling in his hand. Gavin didn't even turn around. He just listened to the footsteps, counted the rhythm, judged the distance, and at the last possible second stepped aside and extended one leg. The guard tripped over it, his own momentum carrying him forward into a marble column with a dull thunk. The taser clattered free, skittering across the floor. The man slumped, conscious but thoroughly dazed, seeing stars brighter than any chandelier. Like I said, Gavin murmured to the lobby at large, his voice carrying in the shocked silence. Wrong man. He walked calmly to where Mia stood and knelt beside her, checking her face for fear, for trauma, for any sign he'd just made everything worse. Are you okay? He asked softly. She nodded slowly, then surprised him by throwing her arms around his neck, hugging him with fierce intensity. The crane kept you safe, she whispered into his shoulder. I told you it would. Gavin hugged her back, and over her shoulder he saw the woman in the black dress approaching. She was young, maybe late 20s, with dark hair and the kind of composed elegance that suggested money, but also something sharper, something earned rather than inherited. Her eyes held intelligence and assessment, cataloging everything she'd just witnessed. Thank you, she said quietly. Nobody else was going to help. I was starting to think. She paused, swallowed. Thank you. You said no, Gavin replied simply, still holding Mia. That should have been enough. Should have been, the woman agreed, her mouth twisting with bitter acknowledgement. But it rarely is it? Police sirens were approaching, growing louder. Westmore was on his phone, probably calling the hotel's legal team. The VIP guests were buzzing with excited conversation, already crafting their versions of events for social media, and the guards were struggling to their feet, nursing their injuries and their pride, their eyes promising that this wasn't over. But for Gavin, it was already over. He'd done what needed doing. He'd stood up when others sat down. He'd answered a call for help that most people had chosen not to hear. Now he just wanted to take his daughter home, away from marble lobbies and champagne classes and people who measured worth in thread count. Come on, Mia, he said, gathering her backpack. Let's go. Mr. Hart, wait. The woman in the black dress pulled a business card from somewhere. Her dress didn't seem to have pockets, but she produced it like a magic trick. I need to speak with you. There are things you should know about what almost happened here, about why those cameras were disabled and those exits blocked. This wasn't random. Gavin took the card, glanced at it. Elena Hartwell, followed by a company name he didn't recognize but felt significant. Later, he said. Right now, I need to get my daughter somewhere quiet. Of course. But Mr. Hart? Elena's eyes held something complicated. Gratitude mixed with concern, mixed with calculation. What you just did. What you showed. People are going to want to know more. That video is already spreading. Gavin glanced around at the forest of phones, at the lights still blinking, still recording. He'd been so focused on stopping the threat that he'd temporarily forgotten the audience. Let them wonder, he said quietly. But even as he said it, he knew it was futile. The internet had its teeth in this now, and it wouldn't let go. By morning, he'd be famous for all the reasons he'd spent years trying to avoid. The police arrived as Gavin reached the lobby doors, and he had a moment of decision. Leave and let them sort it out, or stay and give his statement and get pulled into the exact kind of attention he'd been avoiding for years. Mia's hand in his made the choice for him. Officers, he called, turning back. The woman in the black dress can explain what happened. I'm just a contractor who has a daughter to get home. If you need my statement, you can reach me at this number. He scribbled his contact information on the back of a business card from the reception desk and handed it to the nearest officer. The cop looked at the card, then at Gavin, then at the scene of incapacitated guards and stunned witnesses. Sir, we're going to need you to stick around. My daughter, Gavin said quietly, and something in his voice, the same authority that had once commanded special operations teams, made the officer pause. She's 10 years old. She just watched her father get into a physical altercation in a hotel lobby because nobody else would help a woman who needed it. I need to get her somewhere safe and quiet, where I can make sure she's okay. So you can take my statement now or you can call me later, but either way, I'm taking my daughter home. The officer studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. We'll be in touch. Don't leave town. I work 2 blocks from here, Gavin said. I'm not going anywhere. Outside, the late morning sun felt too bright after the lobby's elegant dimness. Gavin led Mia to their car, a Honda Civic with 180,000 miles and a transmission that made concerning sounds on hills, and helped her into the back seat, buckling her in carefully. Dad? She said as he slid into the driver's seat. Those men were bad, weren't they? Not just rude, actually bad. Yeah, baby. They were bad. And you stopped them. It wasn't a question. I stopped them. She was quiet for a moment, her fingers pulling at the hem of her shirt. Then, is that what you used to do? Before Mom got sick? Before we moved here? Gavin's hands tightened on the steering wheel, the tattoo on his forearm catching the light. He'd never hidden it from her, but he'd never explained it either. She'd asked once, when she was 7, and he'd said it was from his old job, and left it at that. Something like that, he admitted. It was complicated work, sometimes dangerous, but it was a long time ago. The man with the weapon, he looked scared when he saw your arm. Why? Too smart. She'd always been too smart, too observant. Because he recognized something he shouldn't have, something that's supposed to be forgotten. But you're not forgotten, Mia said softly. You're right here. Gavin looked at her in the rearview mirror, his heart doing that thing again where it hurt and soared at the same time. Yeah, sweet girl. I'm right here. And that's where I'm staying. He started the car, the engine coughing to life like an old man waking up. As he pulled out of the Aurelia's circular drive, he glanced back at the gleaming entrance and saw Elena Hartwell standing there, watching him leave, her phone pressed to her ear, her expression thoughtful. Something told him he hadn't seen the last of her. Something told him that what had happened in that lobby wasn't an ending, but a beginning, the kind that no matter how much you wanted to walk away from it, wouldn't let you go. But that was a problem for later. Right now, he had a daughter who'd had her world shaken, again, and who needed her father to be steady, to be present, to be safe. The yellow origami crane crinkled in his pocket as he drove. Mia's daily promise folded into paper and hope. If the crane stayed safe, he stayed safe. If only it were that simple. The apartment was quiet when they got home, the kind of silence that felt heavy after the chaos of the hotel lobby. Gavin unlocked the door and watched Mia slip inside, her backpack dragging behind her like she'd suddenly forgotten how to carry its weight. She went straight to her room without a word, and he let her go, understanding that sometimes 10-year-olds needed space to process things that shouldn't have been theirs to process in the first place. He stood in the kitchen, small, clean, everything in its place because order was one of the few things he could control, and pulled the yellow crane from his pocket. It had gotten slightly crushed during the confrontation, one wing bent at an angle that nature never intended. He smoothed it carefully, trying to restore its shape, but paper remembered trauma the same way people did. It would never be quite the same. His phone buzzed, then again, and again. Gavin pulled it out and watched notifications cascade across the screen like a digital avalanche. Text messages from numbers he didn't recognize. Missed calls. Social media alerts, despite the fact he barely used social media. Email after email flooding his inbox. He opened one at random. It was a link to a video with a view counter that was climbing so fast the numbers blurred. The thumbnail showed him mid-motion, his hand on the lead guard's wrist, his face calm in a way that looked almost eerie against the chaos around him. The title read, "Mysterious Dad Takes Down 3 Security Guards. His Tattoo Reveals Shocking Secret." Gavin closed it without watching. He knew what had happened. He didn't need to see it commodified, packaged for entertainment, reduced to clickbait headlines and comment section debates. Another text arrived, this one from a number with a local area code. "Mr. Hart, this is Detective Sarah Chen with Metro PD. We need your full statement regarding this morning's incident at the Aurelia Grand Hotel. Please contact me at your earliest convenience." Before he could respond, his phone rang. The caller ID showed a name he hadn't seen in 6 years, Marcus Webb. Gavin stared at the screen for 3 full rings, his thumb hovering over the decline button. Marcus was from the old life, from Nightfall Protocol and black sites and missions that officially never happened. They'd served together, bled together, trusted each other with secrets that could end careers or worse. And then Gavin had walked away from all of it, disappeared into civilian life, and hadn't looked back. He answered on the 4th ring. "Marcus." "Jesus Christ, Gav." Marcus's voice was exactly the same, gravel and honey, authority wrapped in casual warmth. "You've been civilian for 6 years, and the first time you show up on my radar is a viral video of you dismantling 3 guards in a 5-star hotel? That's your idea of keeping a low profile?" Despite everything, Gavin felt his mouth twitch toward a smile. Wasn't exactly planned. How'd you find me so fast? How do you think? Half the intelligence community just watched you roll up your sleeve and flash your unit tattoo on camera. That ink went extinct with the program, or it was supposed to. People are asking questions, Gav. Uncomfortable questions. Gavin moved to the window, looking out at the street below, where life continued its ordinary rhythms. A woman walking her dog. Kids riding bikes. Normal people doing normal things, oblivious to the fact that classified ghosts were suddenly walking around in broad daylight. Let them ask, he said quietly. I'm not hiding. I'm just living. In a one-bedroom apartment in the city, working maintenance contracts to pay off your late wife's medical bills, raising a daughter alone. Marcus's voice softened. I know, brother. I kept tabs. Not invasive ones, just enough to know you were okay. Or as okay as any of us ever get after what we did. Why are you calling, Marcus? There was a pause, and Gavin could practically hear his old friend choosing his words carefully. Because that video didn't just go viral with cat video enthusiasts and fight scene fanatics. It landed on some very specific desks. People who remember Nightfall. People who've been looking for any sign that the program left survivors. Because there are still loose ends from those operations. Dangerous ones. Gavin's grip tightened on the phone. I'm out. 6 years out. Whatever loose ends exist, they're not my problem anymore. I wish that were true, but you know how this works. The second you stepped into that lobby and showed that ink, you put yourself back on the board, whether you want to be or not. Through Mia's closed door, Gavin could hear her moving around, the soft sounds of papers rustling. She was folding more cranes, probably, finding comfort in creation, in small rituals that promise safety in an unsafe world. I have a daughter, Gavin said, his voice harder now. She's already lost her mother. I'm not letting whatever's left of my old life touch her. You understand me, Marcus? I will burn down anyone who tries. I know you will. That's part of why I'm calling, to give you a heads up that people are going to come looking, asking questions. Some official, some less so. You need to be prepared. Prepared how? For starters, get your story straight about what you've been doing since the program ended. Get a lawyer if questions get too pointed. And Gav? Marcus's voice dropped lower. Watch your back. Not everyone who remembers Nightfall remembers it fondly. Some people would prefer those ghosts stayed dead. The call ended before Gavin could respond. He stood there holding his phone, staring at his reflection in the darkened screen, seeing the tired contractor and the ghost of the operator he used to be overlapping like a double exposure photograph. A knock at the door made him turn. Through the peephole, he saw Detective Chen, Asian woman in her 40s, sharp eyes, wearing a blazer that couldn't quite hide the service weapon at her hip. She was alone, which was either a good sign or a concerning one. Gavin opened the door. Detective? Mr. Hart, thank you for seeing me without advance notice. I know you've had a difficult morning. Her voice was professional, but not unkind. May I come in? He stepped aside, letting her enter. She took in the apartment with a cop's practiced assessment, noting exits, checking corners, cataloging details that might matter later. Her eyes lingered on the origami cranes scattered across the coffee table, dozens of them in various colors. Mia's accumulated creations. Your daughter makes these? Chen asked. Every day. It's her thing. They're beautiful. She picked one up carefully, a blue crane with wings spread mid-flight. My grandmother used to make them. Said each one carried a wish. Mia says they're promises, Gavin replied, remaining standing even though Chen had taken a seat on the couch. Protection. As long as the crane stays safe, the person it's for stays safe. That's lovely, especially after what she witnessed today. Chen set the crane down gently and pulled out a tablet. Speaking of which, I need your formal statement about the incident at the Aurelia Grand Hotel. I've already spoken with multiple witnesses, reviewed the security footage and the cell phone videos, and interviewed the woman you helped, but I need to hear your version. Gavin gave her the facts, clean and chronological. He'd learned long ago that the best statements were the boring ones. No embellishment, no interpretation, just what happened in order. Chen listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on her tablet. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment, then looked up at him with an expression that suggested she was seeing past the contractor facade to something underneath. The The guard said you identified yourself as former military, she said. Special operations specifically, but when I ran your background, I got interesting results. Large portions of your service record are classified above my clearance level. That's unusual for someone who's been civilian for 6 years. I did my time, got out honorably, that's all that matters. Normally I'd agree, but Mr. Hart, you just disabled 4 trained security personnel, one of them a former Marine, in under 10 seconds, using techniques that most people only see in movies. And that tattoo on your arm? I showed it to a friend in military intelligence. He went very pale and told me to drop it, said I was touching things I shouldn't touch. Gavin said nothing. Silence was often the best response when people started getting too curious about classified operations. Chen leaned forward. I'm not trying to dig into state secrets. I'm trying to understand if you're a threat or an asset. Because right now, the Aurelia's management is screaming for your arrest. They're claiming you assaulted their security staff, caused property damage, traumatized their guests. They've got expensive lawyers drafting expensive complaints. And the woman who was being cornered? The one who said no multiple times while everyone watched? What's she saying? Elena Hartwell. Chen smiled slightly. She's saying you're a hero. She's also saying that what happened to her was part of a pattern of harassment and assault at that hotel, coordinated between certain security staff and protected by management. She's filing her own complaint, and given who the Hartwells are, her complaint carries significantly more weight than the hotel's. Gavin processed that. Who are the Hartwells? You really don't know? Chen looked genuinely surprised. Elena Hartwell is the daughter of Jonathan Hartwell, CEO of Hartwell Global. They own hotels, resorts, and property management companies across 40 countries. Her family is worth somewhere north of $3 billion, and apparently she's been working undercover in various hospitality positions for the past year, documenting labor violations and safety issues. That explained the designer dress and the calm competence under pressure. Elena wasn't just some random victim. She was someone with resources, intelligence, and a mission. The hotel's lawyers are going to have a hard time painting her as unreliable, Chen continued, especially with video evidence showing their security staff ignoring her repeated refusals. Add your intervention, the disabled cameras and exit signs, the coordinated positioning of the guards. This looks less like an isolated incident and more like a systemic problem. So what do you need from me? Honestly, nothing beyond what you've already given me. Your actions were clearly defensive on behalf of a third party in distress. The force you used was proportional and controlled. No lasting injuries, no excessive violence. You're in the clear legally. Chen paused. But Mr. Hart, I need to give you some unofficial advice. This video has nearly 5 million views and climbing. People are digging into your background, trying to figure out who you are. Some of that attention is going to be unwanted. I don't want any attention. I want to work my contracts, raise my daughter, and be left alone. I understand, but the internet doesn't care what you want. By tomorrow, you'll probably have reporters camping outside this building, job offers, movie deals, people wanting to turn you into some kind of viral vigilante hero. She stood, handing him a business card. When it gets overwhelming, and it will, call me. I can help run interference with the press, at least. After Chen left, Gavin stood in his quiet apartment and felt the walls closing in. Not physically, but temporally. The past he'd tried to bury was clawing its way back to the surface, pulled up by 5 million views and one moment of doing the right thing. His phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from an address he didn't recognize. Subject line: We need to talk about what you really stopped today. The message was brief. Mr. Hart, what happened at the Aurelia wasn't random harassment. It was a test. The woman you saved is in more danger than she knows, and so are you. If you want answers, meet me at Riverside Park, South Bench near the fountain, 8 p.m. tonight. Come alone. Someone who remembers nightfall. Gavin deleted the email immediately, his tactical instincts screaming warnings. Anonymous meetings after viral incidents were textbook ambush setups. No identification, no verification, just a vague promise of answers and a demand he come alone. Everything about it was wrong. But the mention of Nightfall bothered him. That name shouldn't be in civilian emails. It shouldn't be known outside of very specific classified circles. which meant either this was someone from his old life or someone who'd obtained information they absolutely shouldn't have. Mia's door opened, and she emerged holding a green crane, its wings perfectly symmetrical. She walked over and held it up to him. "This one's for the lady in the black dress," she said quietly, "the one you helped. So she stays safe too." Gavin took the crane, his throat tight. "That's really kind of you, sweetheart." "She was scared. I could tell. But you made her not scared anymore." Mia looked up at him with eyes too old for her age. "That's what you used to do, wasn't it, before? You made people not scared." "Sometimes," he admitted, "when I could." "Will those bad men come here? To our home?" The question hit him like a physical blow. This was what he'd been most afraid of. Not the legal consequences or the media attention, but the fear taking root in his daughter's mind, the loss of safety in the one place that should always feel secure. He knelt down, bringing himself to her level. "No, baby, they won't. I promise you, this apartment is safe. You are safe. Nothing from today follows us here." "But what if people get mad? What if they want to hurt you because you hurt them?" "I didn't hurt them. I stopped them from hurting someone else. There's a difference." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "And Mia, listen to me. The world is going to try to tell you stories about what happened today. Some people will say I'm a hero. Some will say I was wrong to get involved. Some will make it into something bigger than it was. But here's the truth. I saw someone who needed help, and I helped them. That's all. And I would do it again, every single time. Even if it's dangerous? Especially if it's dangerous, because that's when help matters most." She hugged him then, fierce and sudden, and he held her while his phone continued buzzing with messages from a world that wanted to turn a father's choice into entertainment, into controversy, into anything except what it actually was. A man remembering that some things mattered more than safety. That evening, after Mia had gone to bed with a small army of paper cranes arranged on her nightstand like protective spirits, Gavin stood at his kitchen window and watched the sun set behind the city's jagged skyline. The email about the meeting nagged at him, its mention of nightfall creating an itch he couldn't scratch. He knew he shouldn't go. Every tactical bone in his body said it was a trap, or at minimum a complication he didn't need. But the mention that Elena was in more danger gnawed at him. If there was a real threat, if this morning's incident was part of something larger, then walking away meant leaving her exposed. And he'd already proven he wasn't the kind of man who could do that. At 7:30, he called the neighbor across the hall, Mrs. Kim, a grandmother who'd watched Mia before and knew their routines. She agreed to come sit while Mia slept, asking no questions about why Gavin needed to go out so late. He was grateful for her discretion. By 7:50, he was approaching Riverside Park, his senses heightened to threat assessment mode. The park was quiet at this hour, the after-work joggers gone home, the evening dog walkers not yet emerged. Streetlights created pools of amber illumination separated by shadows deep enough to hide anything. The south bench near the fountain was occupied by a single figure. And as Gavin approached, he felt recognition click into place even before he could see the face clearly. Elena Hartwell sat with perfect posture, her earlier black dress replaced by jeans and a leather jacket, but maintaining the same composed elegance. She wasn't alone. Two men in dark suits stood at a discreet distance, clearly security, clearly professional. "Mr. Hart," she said as he stopped a few feet from the bench. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "That email mentioned Nightfall. How do you know that name?" "Because I've spent the past year investigating a network of criminals who've been using my family's hotels for trafficking, money laundering, and worse. And in the course of that investigation, I've learned that several of the key players have connections to black operations programs from the mid-2000s. She gestured to the bench. "Please sit. We have a lot to discuss." Gavin remained standing. "You sent that email?" "I did. I'm sorry for the dramatic setup, but I needed to speak with you privately, and I suspected your phone was already being monitored after this morning's video." "Monitored by who?" "Several parties. The hotel's corporate security team, almost certainly. Possibly elements within federal law enforcement who've been trying to build cases against the trafficking network. And potentially some less official groups who have reasons to be interested in anyone associated with Nightfall Protocol." Gavin's jaw tightened. You're well informed. I'm thorough. When you saved me this morning, I didn't know who you were. But after watching that video, after seeing that tattoo and the way you moved, I started digging, made some calls to people who know people, learned that Gavin Hart used to be someone else entirely. She met his eyes directly. Someone who officially died in a classified incident 6 years ago. That person is dead, Gavin said flatly. I'm just a contractor now. A single father. That's all I want to be. I understand, and I respect that choice. But Mr. Hart, Gavin, what happened at the Aurelia this morning wasn't random. Those guards weren't just being predatory. They were testing my security detail, probing my routines, looking for vulnerabilities. The man who cornered me? His real name is Victor Reeves, former CIA contractor with documented connections to arms trafficking. He's been working hotel security for 3 months, always positioning himself near high-value targets. But Gavin processed that, his tactical mind automatically running through implications. You think they're planning something larger? I know they are. I have documentation, recorded conversations, financial trails. What I don't have is the kind of tactical expertise to anticipate how they'll move when they realize I'm onto them. I don't have someone who understands how operations like this actually work. She paused. I need help, Gavin. Real help. The kind that understands the difference between corporate security and actual combat operations. I'm not for hire. Not for this kind of work. Not anymore. I'm not offering to hire you. I'm asking for your help stopping something that's going to hurt a lot of people if it continues. These men are using luxury hotels as hunting grounds. They target vulnerable employees, guests who won't be believed, situations where money and influence can bury complaints. And they're good at it. Without evidence, without someone willing to stand up the way you did this morning, they're untouchable. One of Elena's security men approached and murmured something. She nodded, then turned back to Gavin. Someone's watching us. We need to move. Who? Don't know yet, but my team spotted a vehicle that's been circling the block, occupants using surveillance equipment. She stood smoothly. Walk with me. We're safer moving. Gavin's instincts confirmed what she was saying. He'd felt eyes on them for the past 2 minutes, that particular sensation of being targeted that operators learned to trust. They started walking toward the park's north exit, Elena's security detail bracketing them at a distance. This morning, Elena continued as they walked, you asked your daughter if she was okay. You checked her before you checked yourself. That told me everything I needed to know about what kind of man you are. The world needs more men like that, Gavin. Men who stand up when everyone else looks away. Men who remember that some things matter more than staying safe. I stood up for you because it was right, not because I want to get pulled back into operations and networks and the kind of work that cost me everything once already. I know, but Gavin, the network I'm investigating, they know who you are now too. That video didn't just go viral with the general public. It reached people who remember Nightfall, who remember what you and your unit were capable of. And some of those people are very interested in making sure Nightfall's secrets stay buried. They reached the park exit. Elena's car was waiting, a sleek sedan with windows tinted dark enough to be illegal in most jurisdictions. Her security opened the door, but she paused before getting in. I'm staying at a secure location, not the Aurelia, obviously. If you change your mind about helping, here's how to reach me. She handed him a phone, a burner Gavin recognized immediately. It's encrypted and clean, one number programmed in. Use it if you need me or if anything unusual happens. And Gavin, what you did this morning saved my life. I don't say that lightly, and I don't forget debts. She slipped into the car, and it pulled away smoothly, leaving Gavin standing under a streetlight, holding a phone that felt like a door to a past he'd worked 6 years to escape. The surveillance vehicle Elena had mentioned was still there, a dark SUV with government plates, windows reflective. As Gavin watched, it pulled forward slowly, stopping beside him. The rear window descended, revealing a man in his 50s with silver hair and the kind of face that gave away nothing. Mr. Hart, I'm Special Agent Thomas Merrick, FBI. I'd like a moment of your time. Gavin's hand tightened on the burner phone. It's late. I have a daughter at home. I know. Mrs. Kim is watching her. She's very reliable. Merrick's smile was thin. We've been monitoring the situation at the Aurelia for months. Trafficking investigation, multi-agency task force. Your intervention this morning accelerated some timelines. I need to know if you're planning to get more involved. I'm not planning anything except getting home to my daughter. Good, because civilians who get involved in federal investigations tend to get hurt. Or worse. Merrick leaned forward slightly. I also need to know if you've been contacted by anyone claiming to have information about your former unit. Nightfall Protocol has some interested parties who'd like to confirm whether any members survived the termination incident. Why would anyone care about a program that ended 6 years ago? Because that program left behind assets, Mr. Hart. Assets that certain parties would very much like to recover. And suddenly, there's video evidence that at least one Nightfall operator is alive and active. Merrick's eyes were cold. Eyes. So I'll ask directly, has anyone from your old life reached out? Gavin thought of Marcus's call, of the email about the meeting, of all the threads suddenly pulling at him from different directions. He said nothing. Merrick nodded as if Gavin's silence confirmed something. If they do, you call me. Don't try to handle it yourself. Whatever you were, whatever you did, you're a civilian now. Stay that way. The window ascended and the SUV pulled away, leaving Gavin alone under the streetlight with 2 phones in his pocket, his regular one buzzing with the world's attention, and the burner connecting him to a woman who represented exactly the kind of complicated he'd been avoiding. He walked home through streets that felt less familiar than they had this morning, hyper-aware of every car, every pedestrian, every shadow that might hold watchers. By the time he reached his apartment building, he'd cataloged 3 possible surveillance points and identified 2 vehicles that might be tailing him. The old skills never really left. They just waited for the world to need them again. Mrs. Kim was watching television when he got back, Korean dramas playing softly. She stood when he entered, gathering her things. She didn't wake up, the grandmother said. Such a good girl, so peaceful. Gavin thanked her and waited until she'd left before checking on Mia. She was curled under her blankets, breathing deep and even, surrounded by her paper cranes like a charm against nightmares. He stood in her doorway for a long moment, watching her sleep, feeling the weight of choices pressing down. Stay out of it, keep his head down, protect the quiet life he'd built from the ashes of his old one. Or step forward again, acknowledge that some fights found you whether you wanted them or not. The yellow crane from this morning sat on his dresser, still slightly crushed. Tomorrow, he'd help Mia make a new one. Tomorrow, he'd figure out how to navigate the attention and the questions and the ghosts emerging from classified graves. But tonight, he just stood guard over his daughter's sleep. A father first, and everything else a distant second, holding the line between the man he'd been and the man he was trying to be. The burner phone stayed silent in his pocket, waiting for a choice he wasn't ready to make. The choice made itself at 3 a.m. when Gavin's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He answered on instinct, already moving toward Mia's room to check on her, his body responding to threats before his conscious mind caught up. Mr. Hart. The voice was unfamiliar, digitally altered to a metallic rasp. You have something that belongs to us. The woman you protected today has been asking questions she shouldn't ask, looking into business that doesn't concern her. We'd hate for your daughter to pay the price for your heroism. The line went dead before Gavin could respond, but the message was clear enough. They knew where he lived. They knew about Mia, and they were willing to use her as leverage. Gavin stood in the darkness of his apartment, every protective instinct screaming, every tactical calculation running scenarios of threat and response. He could run, disappear with Mia the way he'd been trained to vanish. But running meant abandoning the life they'd built, the stability she needed, the normalcy he'd promised her after her mother died. Or he could fight, step back into the world he'd left behind and end this threat before it could touch his daughter. The burner phone Elena had given him felt heavy in his hand as he pulled it out. One number programmed in, one connection to resources and answers and the kind of support that might keep Mia safe while he dealt with whatever was hunting them. He made the call. Elena answered on the second ring, her voice clear despite the hour. Gavin? What happened? They threatened my daughter 3 minutes ago. Altered voice, untraceable number. They know where I live. There was a pause, and he could hear her moving, the rustle of clothing, the purposeful sounds of someone preparing for action. How specific was the threat? Specific enough. They mentioned you, said I have something that belongs to them. This is about your investigation, isn't it? The trafficking network. Yes, they're accelerating because of this morning's video. You exposed their operation at the Aurelia, and now they're trying to scare you into backing off before you can provide testimony or evidence. Her voice hardened with anger. I'm sorry, Gavin. I never meant for this to touch your family. Well, it has. So now I need to know everything. The whole picture, because I'm not running, and I'm sure as hell not letting them anywhere near my daughter. Where is she now? Asleep, in our apartment, where armed men apparently know how to find her. Not for long. I'm sending a security team to your location. Professional, discreet, the best I have. They'll establish a perimeter and extract you both to a safe house. You'll be moving in 20 minutes. Gavin's jaw tightened. He hated being reactive, hated having decisions made for him by circumstances and threats. But tactical reality overrode pride. Mia's safety was the only variable that mattered. Fine. But Elena, when we're secure, you tell me everything. Every detail of this investigation, every player involved, every threat assessment you have. I'm not walking into this blind. Agreed. And Gavin? Thank you. For not running, for trusting me. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this because they made it about my daughter, and that was the wrong move. He ended the call and went to wake Mia, his mind already shifting into operational mode. Pack light, move fast, trust nothing you can't verify. The old protocols came back like muscle memory, reliable and cold. Mia woke confused when he gently shook her shoulder, her eyes struggling to focus in the darkness. Dad? What's wrong? We need to go stay somewhere else for a few days, sweetheart. Just as a precaution. Can you pack your backpack with clothes and your most important things? We need to be fast. She was awake now, fear sharpening her features. Are the bad men coming here? He wanted to lie, to tell her everything was fine, but Mia deserved honesty, even when the truth was scary. Some people might try. So we're going to go somewhere they can't find us, somewhere safe, okay? She nodded and scrambled out of bed, her hands already reaching for her backpack. My cranes. I need to bring my cranes. Bring as many as fit, but hurry, baby. While Mia packed, Gavin moved through the apartment with tactical efficiency, grabbing essentials and scanning for anything that might provide intelligence to whoever came looking. His service records, Sarah's medical files, anything with Mia's school information, it all went into a bag that would leave with them. He was checking the window for unusual activity on the street below when headlights appeared, a black SUV pulling up to the curb with the kind of precision that marked professional drivers. Two men emerged, both moving with the controlled awareness of trained operators. One scanned the street, while the other approached the building entrance, speaking into a radio. Gavin's phone buzzed with a text from Elena's number. Team is outside. Lead is named Cameron. Former SAS. You can trust him. There was a soft knock at the door, followed by a voice with a British accent. Mr. Hart, I'm Cameron with Ms. Hartwell's security detail. We're here to facilitate your relocation. Gavin checked the peephole, saw a man in his 40s with close-cropped hair and the kind of eyes that had seen combat and learned from it. He opened the door but kept his body angled to protect Mia's room. Identification. Cameron held up credentials without hesitation, along with a photo on his phone showing him standing next to Elena. We need to move quickly, sir. Our counter-surveillance team has identified at least 2 vehicles in the area that don't belong to residents. They're setting up observation posts. How long have they been there? One arrived 40 minutes ago. The second just pulled up 3 minutes past. They're coordinating, which suggests professional surveillance rather than opportunistic threat actors. Gavin appreciated the precise assessment. Cameron was clearly someone who understood tactical situations and communicated them clearly. Give me 2 minutes. He helped Mia finish packing, checking her bag to make sure she had enough clothes and her medications for her occasional asthma. The paper cranes filled half the available space, a rainbow of folded promises that she clutched like lifelines. Is this because of what happened at the hotel? She asked quietly as they moved toward the door. Because you helped that lady? Yes and no. It's because some bad people don't like it when someone stands up to them, but we're going to be fine, I promise. Cameron and his partner, A woman named Torres, who had the compact efficiency of former military, bracketed them as they moved down the stairs. The building was quiet at this hour, just the hum of appliances and the distant sound of someone's television. They emerged onto the street, and Gavin's senses immediately cataloged threats. The surveillance vehicles Cameron had mentioned were visible now that he knew what to look for. A sedan parked too perfectly to see the building entrance, a van with darkened windows positioned at the corner. As they approached the SUV, both vehicles showed signs of activity, interior lights flickering as occupants moved. "They're tracking us," Gavin murmured. "Let them," Cameron replied, opening the rear door. "We've got 3 more vehicles running counter-surveillance. They follow us. They get followed. By the time we reach the safe house, we'll know exactly who they are and who they work for." Mia climbed into the SUV, and Gavin slid in beside her, his body positioned between her and the windows. Torres took the driver's seat while Cameron rode shotgun, both of them moving with practiced coordination. As they pulled away from the curb, Gavin watched his apartment building recede in the side mirror. 6 years in that building. 6 years of building a normal life, of parent-teacher conferences and maintenance contracts, and pretending the past was dead and buried. All of it unraveled in less than 24 hours because he'd done the right thing. Mia leaned against his side, her backpack on her lap, her hands worrying at the straps. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe, with people who can help us." "The lady from the hotel? Ms. Hartwell?" "Yes, she has resources we need right now, people who can protect us while we figure out how to fix this." "Can't the police protect us?" It was a fair question, the kind a 10-year-old should be able to ask and receive a reassuring answer. But Gavin had learned long ago that police couldn't protect against the kind of threat that came from networks with resources and reach. The law was reactive, designed to respond after crimes occurred. What he needed was proactive security, the kind that anticipated threats and neutralized them before they materialized. "The police are good at a lot of things," he said carefully. "But this situation is complicated. Ms. Hartwell has people who specialize in these kinds of complications." The drive took 40 minutes, winding through the city and then out into suburbs before finally turning down a private road that led to a gated estate. Security cameras tracked their approach, and gates opened automatically as they passed checkpoints manned by armed guards who nodded to Cameron with familiar recognition. The main house was modern and sprawling, all glass and steel and strategic lighting that turned architecture into fortress. Elena was waiting on the front steps, still in her jeans and leather jacket, her face showing concern when she saw Mia emerge from the SUV. "You must be Mia," Elena said, crouching down to the girl's level. "I'm Elena. Your dad helped me yesterday, and now I'm going to help both of you. Is that okay?" Mia looked at Gavin, seeking permission. He nodded, and she turned back to Elena with cautious assessment. "He says you have resources." Elena's mouth quirked into a slight smile. "I do. Would you like to see your room? It has its own bathroom and a really comfortable bed. We can get you settled while your dad and I talk about boring adult things." A woman appeared from inside the house, middle-aged, kind-faced, wearing casual clothes that suggested live-in staff rather than security. "I'm Margaret. I help take care of the house. If you need anything at all, you just ask me. Deal?" Mia looked overwhelmed, but nodded, letting Margaret guide her inside. Gavin watched until they disappeared around a corner, his protective instincts screaming at letting his daughter out of sight even in a secured location. "She'll be safe here," Elena said quietly. "Margaret raised 3 kids of her own and has been with my family for 20 years. And there are 8 security personnel on the grounds at all times, 12 during high-threat periods, which this qualifies as. They threatened her specifically, used her as leverage to try to control my actions." Gavin's voice was flat, controlled, but underneath it ran currents of anger that had been building since the 3 a.m. call. That was a mistake on their part. Elena led him into a study lined with bookshelves and dominated by a large desk covered in files and laptops. Cameron followed them in, closing the door and activating what Gavin recognized as a white noise generator, standard counter-surveillance equipment. "Tell me everything," Gavin said. Elena pulled out a chair and gestured for him to sit, but he remained standing. She accepted this and began laying out files on the desk like cards in a deadly game. 18 months ago, my father started receiving complaints about irregularities at several of our luxury properties. Missing funds, unexplained staff turnover, guests reporting harassment that was never properly investigated. The complaints were always handled at the local level, never escalating to corporate, which itself was suspicious. She opened a file showing photographs of men in security uniforms, their faces marked with red circles. I convinced my father to let me investigate undercover. I've been working in various positions across our hotel chain, documenting what I find. The Aurelia was my 5th property, and what I found there was worse than anything I'd seen before. Cameron pulled up digital files on one of the laptops, displaying financial records and communication logs. The trafficking network uses luxury hotels as neutral ground for transactions. High-end properties attract wealthy clientele who don't get questioned, who can move money and people without triggering normal scrutiny. The hotels get a cut, usually funneled through security contracts and maintenance agreements. Gavin's jaw tightened. Maintenance agreements, like the fire safety contract I was there to sign. Exactly. Though your contract was legitimate. But others aren't. They're shells, ways to move money and create paper trails that justify unusual expenditures. Elena pulled out another file, this one showing organizational charts. The network has people embedded in hotel management, security, even local law enforcement. They've been operating for at least 5 years, possibly longer. And the man who cornered you yesterday? Victor Reeves, former CIA contractor, specialized in interrogation and asset extraction during the Iraq War. After the agency cut him loose, he went private. We've tracked him to at least 4 different trafficking operations across 3 countries. Elena's expression hardened. He wasn't at the Aurelia by accident. He was there because I was there, testing my security response, looking for vulnerabilities. Cameron brought up surveillance footage from the hotel, showing multiple angles of the lobby. Notice how the cameras are positioned. They cover the main areas but have significant blind spots. The corner where Reeves cornered Ms. Hartwell? Perfect dead zone. The exit signs being disabled? That prevented her from using the emergency exits without triggering alarms. It was a coordinated trap. Which I walked into and destroyed, Gavin said. And now they know someone with my skill set is protecting her. More than that, your video went viral with that tattoo visible. People started digging into who you really are, and some of those people have connections to the networks we're investigating. Elena pulled out a final file, this one marked with multiple security classifications. This is where it gets complicated. 3 of the key players in the trafficking network have verified connections to classified operations programs from the mid-2000s. Black sites, extraordinary rendition, the kind of things the government would prefer stayed buried. Gavin felt ice form in his stomach. Nightfall, among others. But yes, we found references to Nightfall protocol in intercepted communications. Someone in the network knows about your old unit, knows what you were capable of, and is very interested in confirming whether any operators survived the termination incident. Why? What do they gain from finding survivors? Cameron answered this time, his expression grim. Leverage. Blackmail. The operations Nightfall conducted weren't exactly legal, even by Black Ops standards. If they can prove operators are alive, they can threaten to expose what you did, where you did it, who ordered it. That kind of information has value to hostile foreign governments, to journalists, to anyone who wants to damage American intelligence credibility. Gavin's hands clenched into fists. He'd known this day might come, had spent 6 years trying to stay invisible precisely because exposure meant exposure for everyone, for the handlers who'd run Nightfall, for the politicians who'd authorized it, for the operations themselves that had been messy and morally complicated and absolutely necessary at the time. So, by helping you, he said slowly, I've put myself and Mia directly in the crosshairs of people who want to dig up ghosts for profit. Yes, Elena said simply, and I'm sorry. If I'd known the connection, if I'd realized the network had intelligence ties, I would have handled things differently. But Gavin, the fact remains that you're exposed now. The only way to protect yourself and Mia is to help us dismantle this network completely, remove the threat at its source. You're asking me to go operational, to use skills I've spent 6 years trying to forget. I'm asking you to help me stop people who hurt vulnerable victims for money and power, people who threaten children to control their parents, people who need to be stopped before they hurt anyone else. Elena met his eyes directly. I know it's not fair. I know you've earned your peace. But peace isn't possible when the threat is still active. Gavin turned away, looking out the study's window at grounds lit by strategic floodlights. Somewhere in this house, Mia was probably being settled into an unfamiliar bed, surrounded by paper cranes that promised safety in a world that kept proving how fragile safety really was. He thought about the call at 3 a.m., about the threat implicit in every word. He thought about walking away, taking Mia and disappearing into witness protection, or some new identity far from cities and hotels and networks that knew his face. But he also thought about the woman in the black dress saying no, and everyone looking away. He thought about how many other victims had said no in how many other lobbies, while security cameras were conveniently disabled and exit signs flickered dark. He thought about the kind of world Mia would inherit if good people only helped when it was convenient and safe. I need parameters, he said finally. Rules of engagement, operational boundaries, exit strategies. I'm not doing this cowboy style. Elena's expression showed relief mixed with respect. Agreed. Cameron will be your tactical partner, coordinates all security operations. You'll have full access to our intelligence, our resources, our personnel. But this stays legal. No black ops tactics, no classified methods. We do this the right way, building evidence that holds up in court. The right way gets people killed when you're dealing with professionals who don't follow rules. Then we be smarter than them. We use advantages they don't have. Legitimate authority, legal resources, public attention. Your viral video actually helps us here. The world is watching now. That limits what they can do overtly. Cameron pulled up a tactical map showing hotel locations across the city. We've identified 3 primary targets for immediate action. The Aurelia, obviously, the Grandview Resort, where we've documented similar suspicious activity, and the Metropolitan Plaza, where financial records show the largest unexplained transfers. We hit all 3 simultaneously, coordinate with federal law enforcement, and roll up the network before they can scatter. How long to set up? 48 hours if we move fast. Elena's been building the case for months. We have documentation, witness statements, financial evidence. What we needed was a catalyst, something to force the network into the open where we could see their full structure. Cameron's expression turned sardonic. Your hotel lobby intervention provided that catalyst. Gavin studied the map, his tactical mind already running scenarios. Simultaneous operations meant divided attention and increased risk of something going wrong. But it also meant the network couldn't consolidate defenses or destroy evidence at multiple sites. I want Mia protected by a separate team, not the same personnel running operations. Completely isolated security with no connection to the tactical side. If this goes wrong, I don't want blowback touching her. Done, Elena said immediately. I'll assign my personal security detail to her. They answer only to me and have no involvement in the investigation. She'll be as isolated as if she were in witness protection. And if I say no? If I decide this is too much risk for my daughter? Elena's expression softened. Then I help you disappear. New identities, new location, enough money to start over somewhere quiet. No judgment, no pressure. Your daughter's safety comes first, always. It was the right answer, the one that proved Elena understood what actually mattered. But it also highlighted the impossible choice. Run and spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, or fight and risk everything but at least face the threat directly. 48 hours, Gavin said. Show me your complete operational plan, your risk assessments, your contingencies. I'll decide then. Fair enough, Elena extended her hand. Thank you, Gavin, for not running, for trusting us this far. He shook her hand, feeling the strength in her grip. I'm not doing this for trust. I'm doing this because they threatened my daughter, and that was unforgivable. Cameron showed Gavin to a bedroom down the hall from where Mia had been settled. It was comfortable but functional, the kind of space designed for security personnel rather than guests. Before leaving, Cameron handed him a secure phone and a tablet loaded with intelligence files. Everything we have is on there. Personnel files, surveillance footage, financial records, communications intercepts. Read it all. Look for holes. Tell me what we're missing. You've got operational experience we don't have. Use it. After Cameron left, Gavin checked on Mia. She was already asleep, curled under an unfamiliar comforter with her backpack on the nightstand beside her. Paper cranes were arranged in careful rows on the dresser, a mobile defense force of folded promises. He watched her sleep for a long moment, his heart doing that familiar ache of fierce protectiveness, mixed with fear of failing her. She'd already lost her mother to cancer's slow cruelty. She'd already had to grow up too fast, to learn that the world took people you loved without asking permission. And now he was contemplating going back into the kind of work that had cost him pieces of himself he'd never fully recovered, all to stop threats that should have been someone else's problem. But they'd made it his problem when they mentioned Mia's name in a threatening call. Back in his room, Gavin opened the tablet and started reading. The files Elena had compiled were thorough, showing months of careful documentation. Witness statements from hotel employees who'd seen suspicious activities. Financial records showing money moving through shell corporations. Communications intercepts that referenced packages and deliveries in language that was clearly coded. And woven through it all, references to classified operations and personnel with intelligence backgrounds. Victor Reeves wasn't the only former government contractor working for the network. There were at least 6 others, all with backgrounds in black operations, all recruited after their official careers ended in the kind of scandals that got buried rather than prosecuted. The Nightfall connection was there too, subtle but present. Coded references to Phoenix protocols and ghost assets that matched operational language from his old unit. Someone in the network knew about Nightfall, knew its methods, possibly knew its survivors, which meant they'd been looking for him, or someone like him, for years. Gavin's phone buzzed, his regular one, not the secure device Cameron had provided. A text from Detective Chen. Need to talk, urgent. Not about hotel incident, about people asking questions regarding your background. Call me, he called, keeping his voice low despite the room's soundproofing. Chen answered immediately. Mr. Hart, I've had 3 different federal agencies contact me today asking about you. FBI, CIA, and someone who wouldn't identify their department but had credentials that made my captain very nervous. They're all asking the same basic question. Are you the Gavin Hart who worked for a classified operations unit in the mid-2000s? What did you tell them? That I'm a city detective investigating a hotel assault, not a clearinghouse for classified background checks. But Gavin, this is serious attention. The kind that doesn't go away just because you want it to. What did you do in your previous life that has this many people interested? Things I can't talk about. Things that were supposed to stay buried. Well, they're not buried anymore. And the people asking questions aren't all friendly. One of them, the unidentified agency guy, basically warned me that digging into your background could compromise ongoing national security operations. That's the kind of statement that usually comes with implied threats. Gavin processed that, adding it to the intelligence he'd been reviewing. Did anyone specifically mention Nightfall protocol? There was a pause. Should they have? No. Forget I asked. Gavin, listen to me. I don't know what you're involved in, but as someone who actually gives a damn about your welfare, I'm telling you that you need legal representation. Real lawyers, not public defenders. People who specialize in classified materials and national security law. Because if federal agencies are circling, you're going to need protection. I appreciate the concern, Detective, but I've got resources handling it. You mean Elena Hartwell's resources? Yeah, I know you've been in contact. She's got good lawyers. I'll give her that. But Gavin, her agenda might not align with yours. She's trying to break a trafficking network. You're trying to protect your daughter and stay out of prison for things you did under classified orders. Those aren't necessarily compatible goals. It was a fair point, one that highlighted the fundamental tension in his current situation. Elena needed him operational, willing to take risks to dismantle the network. But his priority was Mia's safety, which argued for minimal exposure and maximum distance from anything that could blow back on her. I'll be careful, Gavin said. Be more than careful. Be smart. And if you need help, real help, the kind that doesn't come with agendas, you call me. Understood? After the call ended, Gavin sat in the dark room staring at the tablet's glowing screen. Files and photographs and evidence stared back at him, painting a picture of systematic exploitation that had been running for years while everyone looked away. Just like people had looked away in the hotel lobby until he'd forced them to pay attention. His phone buzzed again, this time with a text from an unknown number. They're going to betray you. Elena Hartwell isn't who she claims to be. The investigation is a cover for something worse. Meet me if you want the truth. Same park, tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Come alone, or Mia pays. Gavin stared at the message, his tactical instincts screaming warnings. Anonymous texts making threats while promising revelations were textbook manipulation tactics. But the mention of Mia, again, made it impossible to ignore completely. He forwarded the message to Cameron with a brief note. Received this 5 minutes ago. Threat assessment? The response came back within 60 seconds. Known tactic. They're trying to separate you from our security, create doubt about Ms. Hartwell's intentions. Classic isolation strategy. Recommend ignoring unless they provide verifiable proof of claims. Gavin wanted to believe Cameron was right, that this was just manipulation. But years of operations had taught him that the most effective lies contained kernels of truth, and the most dangerous traps were built on legitimate concerns. What if Elena wasn't telling him everything? What if her investigation was cover for something else? Something that put Mia at even greater risk? He had 48 hours to decide whether to trust Elena's operation or walk away entirely. 48 hours to separate truth from manipulation, legitimate threat from psychological warfare. And somewhere in this secured house, his daughter slept surrounded by paper cranes that promised safety in a world that kept proving how little paper promises meant against real threats. Gavin closed the tablet and lay back on the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling while his mind ran through scenarios and contingencies and the 100 ways this could all go catastrophically wrong. The yellow crane from yesterday was still in his pocket, crushed but present. He pulled it out and smoothed it carefully, trying to restore its shape the way he was trying to restore some sense of control over a situation spiraling in too many directions at once. If the crane stayed safe, he stayed safe. If only protecting the people he loved were that simple. Morning came with Mia's voice outside his door, tentative and uncertain in the way children sound when they wake up in unfamiliar places. Gavin was already awake, had been for hours, his body still running on operational time despite 6 years of trying to retrain it for civilian rhythms. "Dad, are you in there?" He opened the door to find her holding a fresh paper crane, this one made from what looked like expensive stationery she must have found somewhere in the house. It was silver, catching the morning light like captured moonlight. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, pulling her into a hug. "The bed's too soft. And it's too quiet here. At home I can hear Mrs. Kim's television through the wall, and Mr. Patterson's dog barking at cars. Here it's just nothing." Gavin understood. Silence felt dangerous when you were used to the ambient noise of apartment living, when quiet meant something was wrong rather than peaceful. He took the silver crane and added it to the collection of crumpled ones in his pocket. "Want to get breakfast? I bet Margaret knows where the kitchen is." They found their way downstairs to discover that Elena's idea of a kitchen was roughly the size of their entire apartment. Margaret was already there, cooking eggs and bacon with the comfortable efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "Good morning," she said brightly, not at all fazed by the appearance of a rumpled man and his anxious daughter. "I wasn't sure what you liked, so I made a bit of everything. There's cereal if you prefer, and fresh fruit, and I can make pancakes if you'd rather have those." Mia's eyes went wide at the spread. At home, breakfast was usually toast and whatever cereal was on sale. This looked like something from a restaurant. "This is perfect," Gavin said. "Thank you." They were eating when Elena appeared, looking like she'd already been up for hours despite the early hour. She was dressed in professional clothes now, her hair pulled back, every inch the corporate executive rather than the woman in the black dress who'd needed rescuing. "Morning, did you sleep?" she asked Gavin, pouring herself coffee from a carafe that probably cost more than his monthly rent. "Some. Read through your files. You've been thorough." "I had time and motivation. Both are powerful tools." She glanced at Mia, who was carefully cutting her bacon into precise pieces. "How are you doing, Mia? I know this is all very strange." Mia looked up, her expression serious. "Are the bad men coming here?" "No," Elena said with absolute certainty. "This house has very good security, lots of cameras and guards and systems to keep everyone safe. Your dad made sure of that before he'd even let you stay here, right, Gavin?" It was smoothly done, redirecting Mia's concern while reinforcing Gavin's role as protector. He appreciated the tactical awareness, even as part of him resented needing it. "That's right," he confirmed. "You're safe here, baby. Safer than almost anywhere else." "Can I go back to school? I have a math test on Friday, and Mrs. Rodriguez said it's important. The question hit Gavin harder than threats from anonymous callers. Mia was worried about a math test while men with classified backgrounds were hunting for leverage against her father. It was the kind of jarring contrast that defined childhood during crisis, the way urgent normalcy persisted alongside existential danger. "We'll figure it out," he said, not making promises he couldn't keep. "Maybe you can do the test remotely, or take it when we get home. Your teacher will understand." Elena's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it with an expression that shifted from neutral to concerned. "Excuse me a moment. Eat, enjoy. Margaret makes the best scrambled eggs in 3 counties." She stepped into the adjacent room, but Gavin could hear her voice through the open door, the tone clipped and professional. "When did this happen? How many casualties?" "No, don't release a statement yet. I need to talk to legal first, and get me full surveillance footage from last night. Every camera, every angle." Gavin set down his fork, his tactical instincts immediately alert. Casualties meant something had gone wrong, and wrong in Elena's world likely meant violence that touched the investigation. "Keep eating," he told Mia gently. "I'll be right back." He found Elena in what looked like a home office, her phone pressed to her ear, her free hand pulling up information on a laptop. Cameron was on a video call on another screen, his expression grim. "What happened?" Gavin asked. Elena held up a finger, finishing her call. When she hung up, her face was pale beneath her composure. "The Aurelia Grand Hotel. There was an incident last night. A fire in the security office. Destroyed most of their surveillance equipment and records. 2 security guards are in the hospital with smoke inhalation. Early reports suggest arson." "They're destroying evidence," Gavin said immediately. "Burning anything that could connect them to the trafficking operation. How bad is the damage?" Cameron answered from his screen. "Complete loss of their digital archives going back 6 months. All the footage from the day of your incident, all the personnel files, everything. If we didn't already have copies from our own investigation, we'd be starting from zero." "Do we have copies of everything?" "Most of it." Elena was thorough. "But there were some hard copy personnel records that only existed at the hotel. Background checks, contractor agreements, that kind of thing. Those are gone now." Gavin's mind ran through implications. Destroying evidence meant the network was feeling pressure, moving to protect themselves. But it also meant they were getting desperate, and desperate organizations made mistakes. The trick was exploiting those mistakes before they escalated to more serious violence. "The guards who were injured," he said, "were they part of the network or innocent staff?" "Unknown yet. We're checking now. But Gavin, this changes our timeline. If they're burning evidence, they're preparing to scatter. We need to move faster than 48 hours." Elena closed her laptop with controlled force. "I'm not rushing this and risking lives. We do this right, or we don't do it at all." "With respect, Ms. Hartwell, waiting gives them time to destroy more evidence, threaten more witnesses, potentially hurt more people." Cameron's voice carried the weight of someone who'd made tactical decisions before. "We have enough to move now. Financial records, witness statements, your own documentation. We coordinate with the FBI task force Detective Chen mentioned, and we hit all 3 properties simultaneously before they can destroy anything else. And if we move too fast and miss something critical, if we spook them into violence against people who can't protect themselves?" Elena's professional mask cracked slightly, showing the anger and fear underneath. "I've spent 18 months building this case carefully, making sure every piece of evidence would hold up in court. I'm not throwing that away for expediency." Gavin understood both positions. Cameron was thinking tactically, recognizing that momentum in operations was everything. Elena was thinking strategically, focused on long-term prosecution that would actually put people in prison rather than just scattering them to regroup elsewhere. "There's a middle option," he said quietly. "We move on one target now, the weakest link in their network, and use that to leverage the others. Hit them where they're not expecting it, force them to react in ways we can track and document." Both Elena and Cameron looked at him, Cameron with interest and Elena with cautious consideration. "Which target?" she asked. Gavin thought about the files he'd reviewed last night, the organizational charts showing the network's structure. "The Metropolitan Plaza. Your financial records show it's their primary money laundering hub, but it's also where they're most exposed. Money leaves trails that are harder to burn than surveillance footage. We hit their finances, freeze their accounts, and watch them scramble to protect cash flow. That's when they'll make mistakes and expose the real players. Cameron nodded slowly. That could work. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit has been wanting authorization to move on those accounts. If we give them cause, they can freeze everything within hours. But that puts the network on high alert, Elena countered. They'll know we're coming for them. They'll prepare. They already know after last night's fire. They're already preparing. Gavin moved to the laptop, pulling up the Metropolitan Plaza files. The question is whether we let them prepare on their timeline or force them onto ours. I vote for ours. Elena studied the screen, her jaw tight with the kind of decision-making stress that came from knowing lives depended on getting it right. Finally, she nodded. Okay, but we do this coordinated with law enforcement, completely by the book. I want federal agents serving warrants, legitimate legal authority behind every action. We're not running some kind of black ops raid. Agreed, Gavin said. Cameron, can you coordinate with the FBI task force? Get them moving on financial warrants while we provide the supporting documentation? Already drafting the request. We'll need Elena's signature on some of the evidence transfers, but we can have warrants by this afternoon if we move fast. They spent the next 2 hours in intense coordination, Elena making calls to her legal team while Cameron liaised with federal law enforcement. Gavin reviewed tactical plans, looking for weak points and vulnerabilities in the approach. It was during this planning session that Detective Chen called Gavin's secure phone. You need to see something, she said without preamble. Can you get to my office? I'm in the middle of something. Can it wait? No, it concerns your daughter's school. Someone showed up there this morning asking questions about her, claiming to be from Child Protective Services. The school got suspicious and called it in. We're checking now, but Gavin, whoever it was, had detailed information about Mia, her schedule, her teachers, her medical history. That kind of information doesn't come from public sources. Ice ran through Gavin's veins. Is she safe? Is there anyone at the school now? We've got units there. Buildings on lockdown. But the person who was asking questions is gone. Disappeared before patrol arrived. Chen's voice was tight with controlled anger. This is escalation, Gavin. They're not just threatening anymore. They're actively looking for access to your daughter. Gavin's hand clenched on the phone hard enough to make the case creak. I need you to maintain security at that school. Full lockdown, no one in or out without verified identification. I don't care if it disrupts classes. Mia's not going back there until this is resolved. Already done. But Gavin, this is serious enough that we need to involve Child Protective Services for real. Not because I think you're a bad parent, but because your daughter needs protection from threats you can't control alone. She's got protection, private security, professional level, better than anything the city can provide. Private security funded by Elena Hartwell, who's currently the target of a trafficking network with demonstrated willingness to hurt children. You see the problem? If something happens to Elena or her resources, Mia's protection disappears. It was a tactical reality Gavin had been trying not to think about too directly. He'd placed Mia's safety in Elena's hands because he didn't have better options, but that made his daughter's security dependent on someone else's continued survival and goodwill. What are you suggesting? Temporary protective custody. We place Mia with a foster family under false identity, completely isolated from both you and this investigation. She's safe, anonymous, and protected by official government resources that don't evaporate if one person gets hurt. Absolutely not. I'm not putting my daughter in the system, not handing her over to strangers, not making her think I've abandoned her. We've already lost her mother. I'm not taking away the only parent she has left. Chen was quiet for a moment. I understand. I do. But, Gavin, they went to her school. They have her medical records. They know where she's vulnerable, and they're probing for access. How long before they actually grab her? How long before your need to be her father gets her killed? The words hit like physical blows, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. His presence in Mia's life, his refusal to let her go even temporarily, might be the thing that got her hurt. 24 hours, he said, his voice rough. Give me 24 hours to end this threat. If I can't, then we'll talk about protective custody. Gavin, 24 hours, detective. That's what I'm asking for. Time to remove the threat so my daughter doesn't have to lose her father on top of everything else she's lost. Chen sighed, The sound of someone who'd made too mmany compromises with too many desperate parents. 24 hours. But if anything happens, if there's any indication they're moving on her, I'm pulling her into custody whether you agree or not. Her safety comes before your feelings. Understood? Understood. He ended the call and stood there for a moment, his hand still clenched around the phone, his breathing controlled but his heart racing with the kind of fear that came from knowing your child was in danger, and you couldn't be everywhere at once to protect her. Elena appeared in the doorway, her expression showing she'd overheard at least part of the conversation. They went to Mia's school. Yeah, asking questions, gathering information, hunting for vulnerability. Gavin's voice was flat, emotionless, the way it got when emotions would interfere with tactical thinking. We're out of time for careful planning. We hit the Metropolitan Plaza today, now, before they can make another move on my daughter. Gavin, we're not ready. The warrants aren't even drafted yet. Then we go without warrants. We go with whatever legal authority we can improvise, and we hit them hard enough that they're too busy protecting themselves to think about threatening children. That's not how this works. We can't just storm a hotel without legal authority. We'd be the criminals, not them. Gavin moved closer, his voice dropping to the tone he'd used when commanding operations in hostile territory. Then you tell me how this works, Elena. You tell me the legal procedure for protecting my daughter from people who have her medical records and know her daily schedule. You tell me the proper paperwork for stopping someone from grabbing her on her way to school. Because from where I'm standing, all your careful planning and legal procedures mean nothing if Mia gets hurt while we're waiting for warrants. Elena met his anger with steady calm, not backing down, but not escalating either. I know you're scared. You have every right to be. But we can't sacrifice everything we've built just because they're pressuring us. That's what they want. For us to make mistakes, to act illegally so they can paint us as the bad guys and dismiss everything we've found. I don't care about painting or publicity. I care about my daughter. I know. But your daughter needs you free and alive, not in prison for assault or illegal entry or any of the dozen charges they'd file the second you crossed the line. She pulled out her phone, making a decision. I'm calling in a favor, someone who can expedite the legal process without cutting corners. It'll take hours instead of days, but it'll be legitimate. Who? My father. He has contacts in the Justice Department, people who owe him favors. If I explain the urgency, he can make things happen fast. Gavin wanted to argue, wanted to do something immediate and violent and satisfying. But Elena was right that illegal action would only make things worse long term, would potentially destroy any case they could build against the network. Hours, he said, not days, because Detective Chen gave me 24 hours before she takes Mia into protective custody, and I'm not letting that happen. Elena made the call, stepping away for privacy. Gavin returned to the office where Cameron was coordinating with the FBI task force, laying out evidence and building probable cause for immediate action. We need to accelerate, Gavin told him. They're moving on my daughter. Showed up at her school this morning with detailed personal information. Cameron's expression hardened. Then we don't wait for full coordination. We go with what we have, hit them with financial freezes and property seizures, force them into reactive mode. He pulled up tactical maps showing the Metropolitan Plaza's layout. I've got a team ready to move. Private security, all former military or law enforcement. We go in as Elena's corporate security investigating property fraud, completely legal under her authority as a major shareholder in the parent company. Once we're inside, we secure evidence and hold position until federal agents arrive with warrants. That's a legal gray area. It's the fastest option that doesn't cross into clearly illegal territory. Elena has legitimate authority to investigate fraud at properties her family owns shares in. We're just providing security for that investigation. Gavin studied the maps, his tactical mind running scenarios. The Metropolitan Plaza was a smaller property than the Aurelia, maybe 200 rooms, with a security office on the ground floor and administrative offices on the second. If Cameron's team went in as corporate security, they could access most areas without triggering lockdowns. What about resistance? If they realize we're coming for their operation, they're not going to cooperate peacefully. That's where you come in. You lead the team, use your operational experience to anticipate their moves. We go in smooth, professional, and we don't give them time to organize resistance, in and out before they can mount a coordinated response. It was a solid plan, the kind that balanced legal authority with tactical aggression. But it also meant Gavin would be in the field, away from Mia, trusting her security to people he barely knew while he focused on neutralizing threats. Mia's protection needs to be airtight while I'm gone. Multiple layers, redundant security, plans for every contingency. Already handled. I'm assigning my best team to her. 4 operators who've done protective details for foreign dignitaries. They'll stay with her here at the estate, no external movements, no potential exposure. Margaret will keep her company so she doesn't feel like she's under guard. Mia. Gavin needed to talk to her before he left, needed to explain why he was going away for a few hours without scaring her more than she already was. He found her in what Margaret had called the library, a room filled with actual books rather than just decorative spines. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by origami paper in every color imaginable, her hands moving with focused precision as she created crane after crane. "Making an army?" Gavin asked gently. She looked up, and he saw the fear in her eyes that she was trying to hide behind creative focus. "Margaret said I could use any paper I wanted. She showed me where she keeps the good stuff for gift wrapping, so I'm making cranes for everyone. One for you, one for Elena, one for Cameron, one for Margaret, so everyone stays safe." Gavin sat down beside her, watching her fold a crane in deep blue paper. Her technique had improved over the years, each fold crisp and perfect, each crane identical to the last, like she was manufacturing hope one sheet at a time. "I have to go help with something," he said carefully. "I'll be gone for a few hours, but Margaret will stay with you, and there will be security people nearby. You'll be completely safe here." Her hands stopped moving. "Are you going to fight the bad men again?" "I'm going to help make sure they can't hurt anyone. That's different from fighting." "But what if they hurt you? What if you don't come back?" Her voice was small, fragile in the way that broke his heart. "Mom said she'd come back from the hospital, and she didn't." Gavin pulled her close, feeling her trembling against his chest. "Mom didn't choose to leave us, baby. She fought as hard as she could, but sometimes our bodies don't cooperate no matter how hard we fight. This is different. I'm choosing to go help some people, and I'm choosing to come back to you. Always. Every single time." "You promise?" He wanted to. He wanted to promise with absolute certainty that he'd walk back through that door unharmed, that no bullet or knife or tactical error would leave her orphaned. But he'd learned from Sarah's death that some promises couldn't be kept, no matter how much you wanted to keep them. "I promise I'll do everything in my power to come back. And I promise that if something does happen, you'll be taken care of. Elena will make sure of it, and Detective Chen, and all the people who care about you. You'll never be alone, Mia. Even if I can't be here, you'll have people who love you." She cried then, the kind of honest tears that children shed when they're scared and trying to be brave but can't quite manage it. Gavin held her and let her cry, knowing that sometimes tears were the only honest response to a world that took parents away and made children worry about things they shouldn't have to understand. When she'd quieted, she pulled back and pressed something into his hand. A crane, this one made from silver paper, with small words written on its wings in her careful handwriting. "Come back safe." "The most important one," she whispered. "Keep it close. It's the strongest protection I can make." Gavin tucked it carefully into his pocket, alongside the collection of crumpled ones from previous days. His daughter's faith in paper promises was probably misplaced, but her love was absolutely real, and that was a kind of protection no tactical gear could match. "I'll guard it with my life," he promised. An hour later, Gavin was in tactical gear for the first time in 6 years, the familiar weight of body armor settling across his shoulders like muscle memory. Cameron had provided equipment that was civilian legal but professional grade, the kind of gear corporate security firms used when protecting high-value assets. The team assembled in Elena's garage was exactly what Cameron had promised. 6 former military operators, all with backgrounds that checked out, all moving with the economical precision of people who'd done hostile entries before. They listened to Gavin's briefing with the kind of focused attention that came from knowing your life might depend on catching every detail. "We go in as corporate security investigating financial fraud," Gavin explained, pointing to the Metropolitan Plaza layout on a tablet. "That gives us legal authority to access administrative areas and request documentation. We're polite, professional, and we don't give them cause to call actual police until we're ready for law enforcement involvement." What if they resist? One of the operators asked, Jackson, former Marine Recon. We de-escalate. We're not there to fight. We're there to secure evidence and identify personnel. But if they escalate to violence, we respond proportionally and legally. Defensive force only, minimal harm, everything documented on body cameras. Gavin met each operator's eyes. This isn't a black ops raid. We follow rules of engagement that will hold up in court. Clear? Nods all around. These were professionals who understood the difference between military operations and civilian law enforcement, who knew how to use force without becoming the bad guys. Elena approached as they were doing final equipment checks, her expression showing the strain of coordinating legal authority with tactical action. Federal warrants are being processed now. My father called in every favor he had. FBI will be ready to move within 3 hours. That gives you a 3-hour window to get in, secure evidence, and hold position. 3 hours is plenty, Gavin said. In and out, clean and professional. She handed him a phone. Direct line to me and to the FBI task force leader. Anything goes wrong, anything at all, you call immediately. And Gavin, thank you. Thank us for doing this, for trusting me, for putting yourself at risk when you could have just taken Mia and disappeared. They threatened my daughter. This is how I protect her, by removing the threat entirely rather than running from it. He checked his gear one final time, making sure everything was secure. You keep her safe while I'm gone. That's the deal. She'll be safer than the crown jewels, I promise. The drive to the Metropolitan Plaza took 20 minutes through mid-morning traffic. The hotel was smaller than the Aurelia, but still upscale, catering to business travelers and corporate clients who valued discretion over ostentation. Gavin studied the building as they approached, noting camera positions, exit routes, potential choke points. They parked in the main lot and entered through the front lobby, 6 operators in professional security uniforms moving with coordinated purpose. The reception desk staff looked up with expressions that shifted from customer service to concern when they registered the body armor and official bearing. Can I help you? The desk manager asked, his hand drifting toward something under the counter, probably a panic button. Gavin pulled out credentials identifying him as Chief Security Consultant for Hartwell Global. We're here on behalf of the primary shareholder to conduct a fraud investigation. We'll need access to your administrative offices and financial records. This is a courtesy notification. We have corporate authority to access all areas of the property. The manager's face went pale. I need to call my supervisor. You can call whoever you need to, but we're proceeding with the investigation now. My team will be securing the security office and administrative areas. Please don't interfere, and this will go smoothly for everyone. It was a careful dance of legal authority and implied threat, giving the staff enough information to understand this was serious, but not enough time to organize resistance. Jackson and 2 other operators moved toward the security office, while Gavin led the remaining team toward the administrative wing. They encountered their first resistance on the 2nd floor when a man in a hotel manager's uniform stepped out of an office and physically blocked their path. He was mid-50s, fit for his age, with eyes that held recognition when they landed on Gavin. You can't be up here. This is private administrative space. We have corporate authority, Gavin repeated. Step aside, please. I don't care what authority you claim to have. You're not accessing these offices without a warrant. Gavin studied the man more carefully, noting tactical awareness in his posture, the way his weight was balanced for either fight or flight. This wasn't a hotel manager afraid of corporate auditors. This was someone protecting something valuable. What's your name? Gavin asked. Richard Morrison, General Manager, and you're trespassing. Richard Morrison, former Army intelligence, discharged under investigation for mishandling classified materials. Cameron's voice came through Gavin's earpiece, having run a quick background check. He's connected to the network, tagged in Elena's files as a primary facilitator. Gavin made a decision. Mr. Morrison, you can either step aside and let us do our job, or you can explain to federal agents in about 3 hours why you were obstructing a corporate fraud investigation. Your choice, but make it fast. Morrison's expression hardened, and his hand went to his radio. Security to admin wing. We have an unauthorized breach. Response team to 2nd floor. So much for going smooth and easy. Lock it down, Gavin ordered his team. Secure the offices. Don't let anyone destroy evidence. The next 3 minutes were controlled chaos. Morrison tried to retreat into his office, probably to destroy files or wipe computers. Jackson intercepted him with a smooth tackle that put the manager on the ground without injury. 2 hotel security guards responded to Morrison's call and found themselves facing operators who were better trained, better equipped, and absolutely not interested in a fight. "We don't want to hurt you," Gavin told the guards as they hesitated in the hallway. "We're investigating financial crimes, not you personally. Step back, let us work, and you walk away clean. Try to stop us, and you're part of the problem." One guard was smart enough to recognize when he was outmatched. He backed away, hands visible, radio clicking as he called for police. The other guard was younger, stupider, or more loyal to Morrison. He went for his baton. Gavin intercepted the swing with techniques he'd used in that hotel lobby, controlling the guard's wrist and applying just enough pressure to make continuing the fight an obviously bad choice. The baton clattered to the floor. The guard went to his knees. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," Gavin said quietly. Then, louder to his team, "How are we looking?" "Security office is secure," Jackson reported through the radio. "2 guards detained, surveillance systems under our control. I'm seeing multiple cameras focused on areas that don't make sense for normal security. Hallways near specific rooms, service elevators, back exits. This is definitely a surveillance operation beyond standard hotel security." "Administrative offices are locked down," another operator reported. "Morrison was trying to wipe a computer when we breached. We stopped him, but he got about 30 seconds of deletion before we pulled him off. Forensics will need to check what he managed to destroy." Gavin secured Morrison with zip ties, corporate security's version of handcuffs, and activated his body camera to document everything. "Richard Morrison, you're being detained for obstruction of a corporate investigation. Anything you say can and will be documented and turned over to federal authorities. Do you understand?" Morrison glared at him with the kind of hatred that came from seeing carefully built operations collapse. "You have no idea what you've just done. No idea who you're messing with." "Actually, I have a pretty good idea. That's why we're here." Gavin pulled out the phone Elena had given him and called the FBI task force leader. "This is Gavin Hart with the Hartwell Global Security Team. We've secured the Metropolitan Plaza and encountered resistance from property management. We have evidence of surveillance systems being used for purposes beyond normal security operations. And we've detained the general manager for attempting to destroy evidence." "How fast can you get here with those warrants?" The FBI agent, Special Agent Maria Santos, sounded both impressed and irritated. "You couldn't have waited 3 hours like we planned?" "Subject resisted and attempted evidence destruction. We responded appropriately to preserve investigative integrity." "Right. Well, the warrants just came through about 5 minutes ago, so you're covered legally. We're 20 minutes out. Secure the scene, don't let anyone leave. And Hart, don't shoot anyone before we get there. Try to keep this professional." "Always," Gavin said, ending the call. The next 20 minutes were tense, but controlled. Police arrived first, city cops responding to the security guard's call about an armed breach. Gavin had to walk them through the legal authority carefully, showing corporate credentials and explaining that federal agents were en route with warrants. The cops weren't happy about private security running operations in their jurisdiction, but they also weren't stupid enough to interfere once they understood the scope of the investigation. FBI arrived with the promised warrants and immediately took control, flooding the hotel with agents and forensic specialists. Santos was a compact woman in her 40s who moved like someone who'd spent years in the field and didn't suffer fools. "Nice work getting in clean," she told Gavin as her team processed Morrison and started cataloging evidence. "Though next time, maybe let the actual federal agents take the lead on breach and entry. Next time, hopefully there won't need to be federal involvement because the network will be dismantled." Santos smiled without humor. "One can hope. But Hart, you should know. The network you've stumbled into is bigger than Elena Hartwell's hotel investigation. We've been tracking these people for years, following money trails that connect to operations in 8 countries. What you did at the Aurelia, what you're doing here, it's accelerated our timeline significantly, but it's also put you on radar you really don't want to be on. Too late for that. They already threatened my daughter. Yeah, I heard about the school incident. That's why I'm telling you this. The people at the top of this network, they're not hotel managers and security guards. They're former intelligence officers with resources and connections that make private security look like mall cops. You've exposed them, and they're going to respond. Gavin had expected this, but hearing it confirmed made it more real. How do we protect against that level of threat? By letting us do our jobs. We've got protective custody programs, witness security, resources specifically designed for situations like yours. Let us move your daughter somewhere safe while we roll up the network. It was the same suggestion Detective Chen had made, the same impossible choice between being Mia's father and ensuring her safety. How long would she be in custody? Weeks, maybe months, depending on how fast we can prosecute. These are complex cases with international dimensions. It takes time. She's 10 years old. She just lost her mother. I can't take away her father too, not for months. Santos's expression softened slightly. I get it. I have kids. I know what you're facing, but Hart, these people know where she goes to school. They have her medical records. They're mapping her vulnerabilities systematically. How long before knowing where she is turns into grabbing her for leverage? Before Gavin could answer, his phone rang, the secure line Cameron had given him. He answered to hear Margaret's voice, calm but urgent. Gavin, we have a situation. Nothing immediately dangerous, but you need to know. Someone's been flying a drone over the estate, surveilling the property. Cameron's team shot it down, but it was recording for at least 10 minutes before we detected it. They got footage of Mia in the garden with me. The bottom dropped out of Gavin's stomach. They'd found her. Despite the security, despite the estate's isolation, the network had located Mia and documented her position. Is she inside now? Is she secure? Yes, Cameron moved her to the interior safe room as soon as we detected the drone. But Gavin, if they're willing to use aerial surveillance, they're planning something. This wasn't just reconnaissance, this was targeting. Santos was watching his face, reading the change in his expression. What happened? They found my daughter, used a drone to surveil the estate where she's being protected. Gavin's hand clenched on the phone hard enough to make the case creak. How fast can you arrange protective custody? I can have a team there in 90 minutes. We'll move her to a secure facility, establish new identity, full witness protection protocols. 90 minutes. In 90 minutes, the network could launch an assault on the estate, could attempt a snatch and grab, could do any number of things that ended with Mia being used as leverage against him. Do it. But I'm going with her. I'm not letting her disappear into the system alone. That's not how witness protection works. You're a material witness now, too high profile. Your daughter needs to disappear completely, which means no contact with anyone from her old life, including you. The words hit like bullets, each one finding flesh. No contact. Complete disappearance. His daughter, terrified and alone with strangers, while he fought battles that seemed to generate more threats than solutions. There has to be another way. There is. You end this. Today. You help us roll up the entire network so completely that there's no threat left to hide from. Can you do that? Gavin looked around the Metropolitan Plaza's administrative floor, at FBI agents cataloging evidence, at computers being seized and files being copied. This was one location, one node in a network that apparently spanned 8 countries and had the resources to deploy aerial surveillance against fortified estates. How many properties are we talking about? How many operations need to be hit simultaneously? Santos pulled up a tactical map on her tablet, showing locations scattered across the city. 6 primary targets locally, 3 of which are already under surveillance. We hit them all at once, coordinate with international partners, and we can collapse their infrastructure before they have time to mount organized resistance. But it requires everyone moving together, perfect timing, and probably more luck than any of us deserve. How long to set it up? With the warrants we just got, with the evidence you've secured, with Elena's documentation, 6 hours. We go at sunset, coordinate raids across all locations simultaneously. 6 hours. In 6 hours, Gavin could help dismantle the network that threatened his daughter, or he could watch that network scatter to regroup and strike from new directions. I'm in, but my daughter stays at the estate with maximum security until we're done. No moving her, no protective custody, not until the threat is completely neutralized. That's a risk. If they hit the estate, then they'll face security that knows they're coming. Cameron's team is professional, the estate is defensible, and we'll have advance warning of any approach. It's a calculated risk, but it's better than separating Mia from everyone she knows while threats are still active. Santos considered this, then nodded. Okay. But if anything changes, if there's any indication they're moving on that location, we extract her immediately. Agreed? Agreed. The next 6 hours were the most intense tactical coordination Gavin had experienced since leaving Nightfall Protocol. Santos's FBI task force provided the legal framework and federal authority, while Elena's resources provided intelligence and logistical support. Cameron coordinated security across multiple locations, while Gavin worked with the tactical teams planning simultaneous entries. It was like conducting an orchestra where every instrument was loaded and every missed note could mean casualties. Elena called at hour 4, her voice tight with stress. The network is reacting. We're seeing increased communications traffic, emergency meetings, people moving money out of accounts we're monitoring. They know something's coming. Let them know. Let them scramble. Panicked people make mistakes, and we're ready to capitalize on those mistakes. Gavin, they're also hardening defenses, adding security to properties we haven't hit yet, moving personnel around. This is going to be more complicated than just walking in and securing evidence. That's why we have federal agents and warrants. That's why we're doing this legally, instead of just storming in like it's a hostile op. Trust the plan, Elena. I'm trying, but I've spent 18 months building this case carefully, and now we're compressing it all into 6 hours of coordinated raids. If something goes wrong, then we adapt. That's what operations are about. But if we don't move now, they scatter and rebuild, and we're back to square one, except they know exactly who we are and what we're capable of. We end this today, or we risk fighting it for years. She was quiet for a moment. How's Mia doing? Margaret says she's making origami cranes for every FBI agent she can think of. Apparently she's up to about 300. It's her way of processing stress. She's a remarkable kid. She is. And when this is over, she deserves a life where she's not making protective cranes because her father had to fight trafficking networks. She deserves normal. You'll get her there, Elena said with quiet conviction. After today, you'll both get there. Gavin wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe that one coordinated operation could end threats that had apparently been running for years. But he'd been in operations long enough to know that nothing ever went completely according to plan, and the gaps between expectation and reality were usually where people got hurt. At sunset, 6 tactical teams hit 6 locations simultaneously across the city. Federal agents with warrants backed by Elena's evidence and Gavin's field intelligence executed entries that were professional, coordinated, and absolutely overwhelming. The Metropolitan Plaza was already secured, but the other locations, including the Aurelia and the Grandview Resort, saw resistance that ranged from passive obstruction to active violence. At the Grandview, security personnel barricaded themselves in the administrative wing and had to be extracted by SWAT after a 4-hour standoff. At a smaller property called the Riverside Inn, someone triggered a fire alarm and evacuation that created chaos and allowed several suspects to escape. But the operation worked. By midnight, federal agents had secured all 6 properties, arrested 43 individuals, including most of the network's local leadership, and seized evidence that would take months to fully process. Santos called Gavin at 1 a.m. with exhaustion and satisfaction mixing in her voice. We got them. Not everyone, not the international players, but the domestic network is rolled up completely. Financial accounts frozen, properties under federal control, key personnel in custody awaiting charges. Anyone escaped that we needed? 3 high-value targets slipped the net during the Riverside evacuation. We've got warrants and we're hunting them, but they had escape protocols in place. Still, it's a massive operational success. You did good work today, Hart. Gavin was sitting in Elena's study, still in tactical gear, too wired to sleep despite the physical exhaustion. What about the threats against my daughter? Are those neutralized? As neutralized as we can make them without prosecuting everyone involved. The people who threatened her specifically are in custody. But Hart, I need to be honest with you. This network has international connections we haven't fully mapped. It's possible someone outside our jurisdiction could still pose a threat. How possible? I can't quantify it. But if I were you, I'd maintain security protocols for at least a few more weeks, keep Mia's location and routine unpredictable, stay vigilant for any unusual activity. The immediate threat is gone, but the network had resources we're still discovering. It wasn't the complete resolution Gavin had hoped for, but it was significantly better than where they'd been 24 hours ago. The active threat was neutralized. Mia could sleep in her own bed without armed guards. Life could start approximating normal again. Thank you, Agent Santos, for coordinating this, for moving fast when it mattered. Thank Elena Hartwell. Her documentation made this possible. And Hart, if you ever want to come work for the Bureau doing tactical consultation, give me a call. You've got skills we could use. After the call ended, Gavin went to find Mia. She was asleep in the estate's safe room, surrounded by literally hundreds of paper cranes in every color imaginable. Margaret sat nearby, keeping watch, her expression showing the relief of someone who'd been genuinely worried about the child in her care. She fell asleep about an hour ago, Margaret whispered, made cranes until her fingers cramped, then finally let herself rest. Poor thing was exhausted. Gavin knelt beside his sleeping daughter, watching her breathe, feeling the weight of the day settling into his bones. She was safe. The immediate threat was gone. They could go home. He pulled the silver crane from his pocket, the one with "Come back safe" written on its wings, and placed it carefully on the nightstand beside her where she'd see it when she woke up. Proof that paper promises sometimes came true, that fathers sometimes did come home, that the world occasionally cooperated with hope. Tomorrow, they'd figure out what normal looked like after everything that had happened. Tomorrow, they'd deal with media attention and legal proceedings and all the complicated aftermath of going viral and dismantling criminal networks. But tonight, Mia was safe, Gavin was alive, and 300 paper cranes stood guard over a little girl who'd learned too young that the world was dangerous but hadn't forgotten how to hope it could be better. That was enough for now. 3 weeks later, Gavin stood in the kitchen of their apartment making pancakes while Mia sat at their small table folding paper cranes from newspaper comics. The morning light came through the window at the same angle it always had, falling across the same worn linoleum, illuminating the same coffee maker that took 3 tries to start. Everything looked normal, felt normal, except for the part where nothing would ever be quite normal again. The video had 37 million views now. Gavin had stopped checking after it hit 20 million, but Mia's classmates kept her updated with the kind of enthusiasm only 5th graders could muster for having a viral celebrity in their midst. She'd gone from the quiet girl who folded cranes to the girl whose dad had taken down bad guys in a hotel lobby, and the social elevation was both thrilling and overwhelming for someone who'd always preferred being invisible. "Dad, Mrs. Rodriguez wants to know if you'll come talk to our class about standing up to bullies," Mia said, carefully creasing a wing on a crane made from the Sunday comics. "She says what you did was an example of moral courage, and that's part of our social studies unit this month." Gavin flipped a pancake, watching it land perfectly in the pan. "What did you tell her?" "That you'd probably say no because you don't like attention, but that I'd ask anyway because she seemed really excited about it." Smart kid. She knew him too well. "Tell Mrs. Rodriguez I appreciate the invitation, but I'm not really comfortable being held up as an example. What happened at the hotel was just doing what needed to be done. That's not heroic. It's just basic human decency." "That's exactly what she said you'd say," Mia replied, adding the finished crane to a growing pile. She said truly brave people never think they're being brave. They just think they're doing what's right. Gavin brought pancakes to the table, studying his daughter's face for signs of trauma from everything she'd been through. The therapist they'd started seeing, Dr. Brennan, who specialized in children who'd experienced crisis situations, said Mia was processing things remarkably well, but that didn't stop him from watching for cracks in her resilience. "How are you feeling about going back to school full-time?" he asked. "You've been doing half-days for a while now. Dr. Brennan thinks you're ready for the full schedule again." Mia poured syrup with focused concentration, creating a perfect spiral. "I think I'm ready. I miss art class in the afternoons, and Marcus has been teaching the other kids origami during lunch. But he's not doing it right. He makes the wings too flat." The casual mention of Marcus, her friend who'd been learning crane folding to keep Mia company during the weeks she'd been too anxious to stay at school all day, made Gavin's chest tight with gratitude for small kindnesses. The world had shown them plenty of cruelty, but it had also shown them people like Marcus and Mrs. Rodriguez and Margaret, who'd sent them home with enough prepared meals to last a month. His phone buzzed with a text from Elena. Meeting at 2 p.m. today. Have something to show you. Can you make it? They'd been meeting weekly since the raids, coordinating testimony and reviewing evidence as federal prosecutors built their cases. 43 arrests had led to 31 indictments so far, with more coming as investigators traced international connections. The network was broken, its leadership either in custody or fleeing prosecution in countries without extradition treaties. But Elena's text had a different tone than the usual case update notifications. Something to show him suggested news rather than routine coordination. Gavin texted back, 2 p.m. works. Mia's in school until 3:30. They ate breakfast in comfortable quiet, the kind of silence that came from two people who'd been through crisis together and didn't need to fill every moment with conversation. Mia had inherited her mother's ability to find peace in small routines, to let the ordinary acts of eating and folding and existing be enough without constant stimulation. After she'd left for school, with Cameron's security team still providing discreet transport until the FBI cleared them for full normalcy, Gavin cleaned up and checked his email. The inbox was still flooded with requests, despite his refusal to engage with media. Job offers from security firms, interview requests from journalists, invitations to speak at conferences about trafficking and corporate ethics. He deleted them all systematically, maintaining the boundary he'd established between the man in the viral video and the father trying to rebuild a quiet life. One email stood out, though. The sender was Marcus Webb, his old Nightfall Protocol teammate. Gav, been trying to reach you through official channels, but you're not responding to anyone. Need to talk, not about the video or the investigation, about something from the old days that's surfacing now because of your exposure. Call me on the secure line. It's important. Not urgent, but important. M. Gavin stared at the message, feeling the past reach forward with fingers that never quite let go. He'd been dreading this. The moment when his public exposure as a Nightfall survivor triggered consequences for the program itself, for the operations they'd run, for the classified missions that were supposed to stay buried. He made the call on the encrypted phone Marcus had given him years ago, the one he'd kept in a drawer and never expected to use again. Marcus answered on the first ring. Thank you for calling back. I know you're trying to stay off grid. What's surfacing? Congressional inquiry. Your video got noticed by some committee staffers who recognized the Nightfall tattoo. They're pushing for hearings about black operations programs from the mid-2000s, accountability for classified missions, the whole oversight circus. Your name came up as potential witness testimony. Gavin's hand tightened on the phone. I'm not testifying about Nightfall. Those operations were classified for reasons, and I'm not the one to decide they should be public. I know, and I told them the same thing, but Gav, the problem is that your viral hero moment has made you a public figure. People are asking why someone with your skills was working maintenance contracts. Journalists are digging into your background. Eventually, someone's going to connect enough dots to write stories that compromise operational security. So what do you suggest? Go into hiding? Change my identity? I've got a daughter in 5th grade who's finally settling back into normal life. I'm not uprooting her again. Marcus was quiet for a moment. There's another option. The people who ran Nightfall, the ones who authorized those operations, they're willing to make an arrangement. You maintain silence about classified operations, and they ensure your background stays protected. Legal buffers, classification reviews, the kind of institutional support that makes curious journalists find other stories to chase. It sounded reasonable, but Gavin had enough experience with intelligence community promises to hear what wasn't being said. What do they want in return? For you to be available for consultation on situations where your specific expertise might be valuable. Not active operations, nothing that compromises your civilian life. Just tactical advice, threat assessment, the kind of thing you could do remotely. They want me on call as an asset. They want you protected and cooperative, which is better than exposed and hostile. Gav, you've got a daughter to protect. This arrangement does that while letting you maintain the life you've built. Gavin looked around his small apartment, at the origami cranes on every surface, at the school photos on the fridge showing Mia's gap-toothed smile before her mother died. This life wasn't much by external measures. Small apartment, basic income, routine that revolved around parent-teacher conferences and grocery shopping. But it was his, built from the ashes of loss and trauma, and he'd be damned if he'd trade it for some arrangement that turned him back into an intelligence asset. Tell them I'll maintain operational security about Nightfall because it's the right thing to do, not because they're offering protection I don't need. Tell them I'm a civilian now, permanently, and that doesn't change regardless of what congressional committees decide to investigate. And Marcus? Tell them if they try to leverage my daughter or threaten my life to ensure my cooperation, they'll discover exactly how much of Nightfall training stays with someone even after 6 years out. Marcus laughed, the sound warm with recognition. There's the Gav I remember. Okay, I'll pass that along. But brother, seriously, if you need anything, if the past comes calling in ways you can't handle alone, you reach out. Some of us from the old unit are still around, still watching each other's backs. I appreciate that. How many survivors are there? How many of us actually made it out? More than the official story suggests. Less than enough to matter. We're ghosts, Gav. The program wanted us erased, and mostly they succeeded. But ghosts have a way of haunting the people who tried to bury them. After the call ended, Gavin sat in his quiet apartment and thought about ghosts and survival and the difference between being erased and choosing to disappear. Nightfall Protocol had wanted its operators dead to protect classified operations. But the operators had wanted to live, to build new identities, to find peace away from the missions that had cost them pieces of themselves. He'd succeeded at that mostly. Found peace in fatherhood and ordinary routines, and the small miracle of his daughter's continued existence. But peace was fragile, and the world kept insisting he be something other than a quiet contractor with a talent for fixing fire safety systems. At 2 p.m., Gavin arrived at Elena's office, not the estate where they'd coordinated operations, but her actual corporate headquarters downtown. The building was glass and steel and ambition-made architectural, the kind of place where people wore suits that cost more than his car and discussed mergers over imported coffee. Elena's assistant, a young man who looked barely old enough to drink, but moved with the efficiency of someone who'd learned to anticipate his boss's needs, showed Gavin to a conference room where Elena waited with several other people. He recognized Agent Santos from the FBI, Cameron looking more corporate than tactical in a business suit, and a woman he didn't know who wore the kind of glasses that suggested she spent her days reading legal documents. Gavin, thank you for coming, Elena said, standing to greet him. I know you're trying to maintain low profile, but there's something you need to see. This is Jennifer Park, my family's chief legal counsel. Jennifer extended a hand. Mr. Hart, I've heard impressive things about your work dismantling the trafficking network. Elena's told me you prefer to avoid publicity, so I'll be direct. We have a proposal that might interest you. Gavin shook her hand warily. I'm not interested in job offers. I've told Elena that repeatedly. This isn't a job offer, it's an initiative. Elena pulled up a presentation on the conference room screen showing images of hotels and security personnel and what looked like training materials. After everything that happened, after reviewing all the evidence of how the network operated, I realized that the problem isn't just one group of criminals. It's a systemic failure in how hospitality industry handles security, boundaries, and protection of vulnerable people. The screen changed to show statistics, assault reports, harassment complaints, incidents of trafficking across luxury properties worldwide. The numbers were staggering, representing thousands of victims who'd said no in lobbies and hallways and hotel rooms while security cameras were conveniently disabled and staff looked the other way. We're launching a new training program, Elena continued. Ethics and boundaries for security workers integrated into our corporate policies across every Hartwell Global property. Real training, not just video modules people click through without watching. Training that teaches security personnel the difference between protecting property and protecting people. Agent Santos spoke up. The FBI is partnering on the curriculum development. We're contributing expertise on recognizing trafficking indicators, understanding coercion tactics, building effective intervention protocols. This could become an industry standard if it's implemented correctly. Cameron added, and we're establishing a new oversight system. Independent reporting structures so that complaints about security personnel don't get buried by local management. Direct lines to corporate ethics boards and law enforcement when situations escalate. Gavin studied the presentation, seeing the careful thought behind it. This wasn't just public relations cleanup after a scandal. This was a genuine attempt to address the structural failures that had let the network operate for years. "It's ambitious," he said, "and it's needed, but I'm not sure what this has to do with me." Elena smiled. "We want to use the paper crane as the program's symbol, Mia's crane specifically. The idea that protection is a promise we make to vulnerable people, a commitment to honor boundaries and respect when someone says no. We'd pay licensing fees, create a foundation in your late wife's name if you'd prefer, use the proceeds to fund victim support services." The proposal hit Gavin harder than he'd expected. Sarah's name on a foundation teaching people to protect rather than prey on vulnerability. Mia's origami transforming from a child's ritual into a symbol that might actually prevent the kind of suffering they'd witnessed. "Mia would need to agree," he said carefully. "This is her creation, her daily promise. I won't commodify her coping mechanism without her full consent." "Of course. We wouldn't move forward without talking to her, making sure she understands and approves." Elena's expression softened. "Gavin, what you did in that lobby, standing up when everyone else looked away, that mattered. It saved my life, yes, but it also showed people what intervention looks like, reminded them that bystanders have power if they choose to use it. We want to institutionalize that lesson, build it into systems so that the next time someone says no, there are structures in place to support them instead of silence them." Jennifer pulled out contracts and foundation documents, walking him through the legal framework they'd developed. It was thorough, protective of Mia's interests, designed to ensure that any publicity or attention could be filtered through representatives rather than directly targeting a 10-year-old girl. "We've also included provisions for your privacy," Jennifer added. "Your name appears as guardian and foundation trustee, but there's no requirement for public appearances or media engagement. You can be as involved or as distant as you choose while still maintaining oversight of how the program develops." Gavin read through the documents, his contractor's eye catching details and implications. The foundation would be funded by Hartwell Global initially, with proceeds from crane-themed training materials going to support services for trafficking survivors. Mia's artistic contribution would be credited without identifying her beyond a young artist whose work inspired this initiative. The whole structure was designed to take something traumatic and transform it into something constructive without exploiting the people who'd lived through the trauma. "I need to discuss this with Mia," he said finally. "This is too important a decision to make without her input. But if she agrees, if she understands what this means and genuinely wants her cranes to be part of helping people, then yes, I think Sarah would have liked that. She always believed in turning pain into purpose." Elena's smile was genuine. "Take all the time you need. This initiative is designed to last for years, not to rush out for some publicity cycle. We want to do it right, which means getting your family's full support and understanding." Agent Santos cleared her throat. "Before you go, there's one more thing. We've finished processing most of the evidence from the raids, and we've identified connections to several cold cases, missing persons, suspicious deaths, incidents that went uninvestigated because victims weren't believed or didn't have resources to pursue justice. There are families who've been waiting years for answers, and because of what you started in that lobby, they're finally getting them." She pulled out a folder containing photographs and case summaries, victims who'd been failed by systems designed to protect them, young women who'd disappeared from hotel jobs, employees who'd reported harassment and been fired instead of supported, guests who'd filed complaints that were dismissed as misunderstandings. "This is what you stopped," Santos said quietly. "Not just the active network, but the ongoing harm they would have caused. Every person they won't traffic, every employee they won't intimidate, every victim they won't create, that's the real impact of what you did." Gavin looked at the photographs, each one representing a life disrupted or ended, a family left without answers, a system that had failed to protect the vulnerable. He thought about the woman in the black dress saying no, about all the other women and men who'd said no in other lobbies and been ignored. "How many cases total?" he asked. 17 confirmed connections to the network, with another 23 under investigation. It's likely we'll never know the full scope of their operations, but we're documenting what we can and trying to provide closure where possible. 17 families getting answers, 23 more possibilities. and all of it stemming from one decision to step forward when stepping back would have been easier and safer. "Make sure those families know," Gavin said. "Make sure they understand that someone finally paid attention, that their loved ones mattered enough for someone to fight for them. That's more important than any training program or foundation." After the meeting, Gavin walked through the city thinking about symbols and meaning and the way small actions could cascade into consequences larger than anyone intended. He'd walked into the Aurelia Grand Hotel to sign a maintenance contract and walked out as someone else entirely, not because he'd changed, but because the world had seen who he actually was and refused to let him be invisible anymore. His phone rang with Mia's school number. His heart jumped immediately to worst-case scenarios, despite Agent Santos's assurances that the threat was neutralized. "Mr. Hart, this is Principal Davidson. Everything's fine, but I wanted to let you know that we've had a situation with reporters trying to access the school grounds asking about Mia. Campus security turned them away, but I thought you should be aware in case you want to arrange alternative pickup today." Gavin's jaw tightened. They'd left Mia alone for 3 weeks, and he'd started to hope the media attention was finally fading. Apparently not. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Keep her in your office until I arrive, please. And Principal Davidson, if any reporters come back, you call police immediately. Trespassing on school grounds to harass a child isn't journalism, it's predation." "Understood. We're taking it seriously, I assure you." Gavin called Cameron while walking to his car. "Media showed up at Mia's school. Can you have someone check if they're still in the area?" "Already on it. We've maintained discreet surveillance on the school despite the FBI's all clear. Old habits and all. I see the van they came in. Local news station. Want me to have a conversation with them about appropriate boundaries?" "Legal conversation only. No intimidation. Nothing that gives them a story about private security threatening journalists. Just make it clear that harassing a 10-year-old for her father's viral moment is the kind of thing that destroys careers and reputations. Consider it done. And Gavin? This is going to keep happening occasionally. The video's still circulating, still getting shared. You might want to consider a more permanent media strategy than just hoping they lose interest." It was advice Gavin had been avoiding, but Cameron was right. Hoping for privacy wasn't a strategy when you'd gone viral with 37 million views. He needed to control the narrative before the narrative controlled him. He picked up Mia from Principal Davidson's office, finding her sitting calmly with her backpack on her lap, folding a crane from notebook paper. She looked up when he entered, her expression more annoyed than frightened. "The reporters wanted to know if you were training me to be a fighter, too," she said, disgust dripping from her voice. "Like I'm some kind of weapon you're building. It was gross." Gavin felt rage flash hot in his chest, but forced it down, breathing through the anger the way his therapist had taught him. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that, baby. Some people don't understand boundaries, don't know when to leave kids alone." Principal Davidson told them to leave or she'd call police. She was very firm about it. I liked that. They drove home in silence for a few minutes before Mia spoke again, her voice careful in the way that meant she'd been thinking hard about something. "Ms. Hartwell came to school yesterday. During lunch, she sat with me and Marcus and showed us pictures of paper cranes in different colors and asked which ones I liked best. She said there might be an opportunity to use my crane design for something important, but she wanted to talk to you first." So Elena had already started the groundwork, talking to Mia directly but appropriately, treating her as a stakeholder in decisions about her own creativity. "She told me about it today," Gavin said. "A training program for hotel security, teaching them to protect people better. They want to use your crane as the symbol, the idea that protection is a promise, like the ones you make every day." Mia was quiet, her hands stilling on the crane she was folding. "Would it help people, like actually help them not get hurt?" "That's the goal. Teaching security workers to recognize when someone needs help, to intervene when they see bad things happening, to be the kind of people who stand up instead of look away. Like you did. Like I did. But for everyone, not just one person in one lobby. Building it into systems so it happens reliably instead of just when someone happens to be paying attention." She finished the crane, smoothing its wings with precision. "I think Mom would like that. She was always saying we should use hard things to make better things. Like when she was sick, she volunteered to test new treatments so other people might not have to be as sick. Taking something bad and making it useful." The observation was so mature, so perfectly Sarah, that Gavin had to blink back sudden tears. His daughter was growing up, processing trauma into wisdom, learning to find meaning in suffering the way her mother had. Yeah, baby, Mom would definitely like that. Then I want to do it. But can I keep making cranes just for us too? Can they still be our thing, even if other people use them for the program? Absolutely. The cranes you make for us are ours, always. This would just be letting the idea help more people while keeping the daily promise between us sacred. She nodded, satisfied. Okay, then tell Ms. Hartwell yes, but I want to help design how they look for the program. I have ideas about colors and patterns. That evening, after Mia had gone to bed with her usual army of protective cranes, Gavin called Elena and gave her Mia's answer. They spent an hour discussing implementation details, timelines for the program launch, ways to shield Mia from unwanted attention while still acknowledging her contribution. There's one more thing, Elena said as they were wrapping up. Something I've been debating whether to tell you, but I think you deserve to know. The investigation isn't completely over. Agent Santos said they've rolled up the domestic network, and that's true, but there are international players who escaped prosecution, and some of them have resources and motivations to retaliate. Gavin's hand tightened on the phone. How immediate is the threat? Not immediate, but persistent. We're maintaining security protocols indefinitely, and I'd recommend you do the same. Not paranoia-level vigilance, just awareness. Keep Cameron's team on call, vary your routines, stay alert for anything unusual. It was what he'd expected. The messy reality that threats didn't end cleanly, that rolling up a network left loose threads that could unravel into new dangers. But it was manageable, the kind of long-term caution he could integrate into daily life without letting it consume everything. Thanks for being honest. I appreciate not being patronized with false assurances that everything's perfectly safe now. You're too smart for false assurances, and you've been through too much to deserve anything less than truth. Gavin, what you did, helping me, protecting Mia, dismantling the network, you didn't just save lives. You reminded people that individuals can make a difference, that standing up matters even when it's risky. That's rare. I'm not interested in being rare. I'm interested in being Mia's father and living quietly and not having reporters show up at her school asking if I'm training her to be a weapon. Elena laughed softly. Fair enough, but whether you want it or not, you've become a symbol. The question is whether you control what that symbol means or let other people define it for you. It was a fair point. The viral video had made him public property, whether he liked it or not. But maybe there was a middle path between complete privacy and full publicity, using the attention to advance causes that mattered while maintaining boundaries that protected his family. I'll think about it, he said. But Elena, thank you for everything. For the resources to protect Mia, for the opportunity with the foundation, for treating us like partners instead of victims to be managed. It mattered. You're welcome. And Gavin, if you ever need anything at all, you call me. You saved my life. That creates obligations I take very seriously. After they hung up, Gavin checked on Mia one last time. She was deeply asleep, her breathing steady, surrounded by her paper promises. The silver crane with "Come Back Safe" written on its wings sat on her nightstand like a trophy, proof that sometimes promises came true. He returned to his own room and pulled out a box he kept in the closet, the one containing Sarah's things he couldn't quite part with. Her wedding ring, some photos from before the cancer, a letter she'd written him during one of her hospital stays. And beneath those, wrapped in tissue paper, the very first crane Mia had ever made, crumpled and asymmetrical, created when she was 6 and just learning the folds. We're doing okay, he told the box, told Sarah's memory, told the past that kept shaping his present. Mia's strong, like you, smart and kind, and learning to turn hard things into better things. I think you'd be proud of who she's becoming. The box didn't answer, but he hadn't expected it to. Some conversations were one way. Prayers thrown into silence with faith they landed somewhere that mattered. 2 months later, the Ethics and Boundaries training program launched across all Hartwell global properties worldwide. The symbol was a simple paper crane in silver, wings spread in flight, with the tagline, "Protection is a promise." Mia had designed 3 variations: silver for standard training completion, gold for advanced certification, and a special rainbow version for security personnel who'd intervened in real situations to protect vulnerable people. The program's launch made news, but it was corporate news rather than viral sensation. Articles in hospitality industry publications, coverage in business sections about ethical corporate governance. Mia's contribution was credited as designed by a young artist whose work inspired this initiative, without photos or identifying details. Her privacy remained intact while her creativity helped reshape how an entire industry thought about protection. Gavin attended the launch event at Elena's insistence, standing in the back of a hotel ballroom while executives and security professionals learned about boundary recognition and intervention protocols. He watched training videos showing actors in lobby scenarios, security personnel learning to recognize coercion, employees being taught that reporting concerns wouldn't cost them their jobs. It was surreal, seeing that moment in the Aurelia lobby transformed into educational content, his actions broken down into teachable techniques and decision points. The video pixelated his face and Mia's, protected their privacy while preserving the lesson. But he still recognized himself in the footage, the moment of decision, the step forward when everyone else stepped back, the choice to make someone else's safety his problem. Pretty weird seeing yourself as curriculum, Cameron said, appearing beside him with 2 glasses of champagne. Though they did a decent job with the tactical breakdown, accurate assessment of threat escalation patterns. Gavin accepted the champagne but didn't drink it. I keep thinking about all the other lobbies, all the other moments where people said no and nobody helped. This is good, this training. But it's just one company, one program. The problem is so much bigger. Sure, but you can't fix everything. You can just fix what's in front of you and hope it spreads. Elena's already getting calls from other hotel chains wanting to license the program. Give it a year, this could be industry standard training worldwide. That would be something. They stood in comfortable silence, watching security professionals practice intervention scenarios, learning to trust their instincts when something felt wrong rather than defaulting to protecting property over people. How's Mia doing? Cameron asked. Still making cranes? Every single day. She's up to about 50 different folding patterns now, teaching kids at school during lunch. Started a little origami club. It's become her thing beyond just the protection ritual. Good. Kids need things that are theirs, especially after trauma. Gives them control when everything else feels chaotic. Gavin's phone buzzed with a text from Mia, who was at home with Margaret for the evening. Dad, Marcus just learned the advanced wing pattern. He's getting really good. When are you coming home? He texted back. 2 hours, maybe less. Proud of you for teaching Marcus. Love you. The response came immediately. Love you too. Your crane is ready for when you get home. That nightly ritual had continued, Mia making him a fresh crane every day, Gavin keeping them in his pockets until they accumulated into collections that he stored in a drawer like talismans against harm. He had hundreds now, a rainbow archive of his daughter's daily promises. Elena found him as the event was winding down, her corporate mask firmly in place for the public setting, but her eyes showing genuine warmth when she approached. Thank you for coming. I know these things aren't your favorite. It's important, and Mia wanted me to tell you she approves of the gold certification design. Apparently the wing angles are exactly right. Elena smiled. She sent me 12 pages of notes about color theory and symbolic meaning. Your daughter is remarkably thoughtful about design principles for a 10-year-old. She gets it from her mother. Sarah was an architect before the cancer, saw beauty in structure, meaning in form. Gavin paused, then added, this program, the foundation, using Mia's cranes to teach protection, Sarah would have loved it. She believed in practical compassion, in building systems that helped people rather than just talking about helping. You've honored that. I'm glad. And Gavin, I want you to know the network's international connections we were worried about, Agent Santos's team has been making progress on those prosecutions. It's slow, complicated by jurisdiction issues, but they're moving forward. The threat level keeps decreasing. That's good news. It is, which means you can actually start thinking about your future rather than just managing present crises. Have you given any thought to what you want that future to look like? Gavin considered the question. 6 months ago, his future had been simple. Survive, protect Mia, maintain the fragile normal they'd built from grief. But now, With the immediate threats neutralized and resources available through the Foundation, he had the luxury of thinking beyond survival. "I want Mia to have choices," he said finally. "Good schools, college if she wants it, opportunities to explore whatever interests her without worrying about money. I want her to grow up knowing that standing up for people is worth doing, but also that she's not responsible for fixing everything broken in the world. Balance, I guess. Safety with purpose." Those are good goals, achievable ones, especially with the Foundation providing financial stability. Elena hesitated, then added, "I've also been thinking about what happens when threats are fully resolved. Cameron's team won't be needed for security indefinitely, but I'd like to keep you connected to our work if you're interested. Not operations, not anything tactical, just consultation on safety protocols, feedback on training development, using your experience to help us build better systems." "Paid consultation? Of course. Your expertise has value, and I don't expect you to donate it just because we worked together during crisis. This would be contract work, remote mostly, structured around your schedule with Mia." It was tempting. Work that used his actual skills rather than just his ability to fix fire safety systems. Income that would provide security without requiring him to go back into tactical operations. And it would keep him connected to the work of preventing the kind of harm they'd fought to stop. "Let me think about it," Gavin said. "Talk to Mia. Make sure she's comfortable with me staying involved even at a consulting level. But Elena, if I do this, I need clear boundaries. I'm not becoming a public face for your company. I'm not doing media appearances or speaking engagements. I consult on protocols and training, nothing more." "Completely understood. Your privacy and Mia's well-being are non-negotiable priorities." The event ended with Elena giving a speech about corporate responsibility and ethical security practices, carefully crafted words that probably meant something to the industry professionals in attendance. Gavin slipped out before the applause finished, wanting to get home before Mia's bedtime, wanting to see whatever crane she'd made for him today. The drive home took him past the Aurelia Grand Hotel, its gleaming facade lit up against the evening sky. He'd driven past it dozens of times since that morning, but usually looked away, not wanting to relive the moment that had changed everything. Tonight, though, he let himself look. The lobby was visible through the glass walls, people moving through it with the same oblivious elegance as always. But there was different signage now, visible even from the street, something about new security protocols and ethics training. Small changes maybe, but changes nonetheless. One person standing up in one lobby had cascaded into training programs and policy changes and foundations teaching protection as promise. It wasn't everything. It didn't erase all the harm that had already happened or prevent every future threat. But it was something which was infinitely better than nothing. At home, Mia was waiting with a crane made from midnight blue paper, stars printed on its wings like a captured night sky. "This one's special," she said, placing it carefully in his hands. "I made it because you went to the big event and did a brave thing even though you hate attention. So it's a brave crane, for being brave in a different way than fighting." Gavin held the crane carefully, feeling the weight of his daughter's understanding that courage took many forms. "Thank you, sweet girl. I'll keep it safe." "I know you will. You always do." That night, after Mia was asleep, Gavin sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and thought about trajectories and choices and the difference between the life he'd planned and the life he was actually living. He'd wanted quiet anonymity, simple existence far from classified operations and tactical decisions. Instead, he'd become a viral symbol, a foundation trustee, a consultant on corporate ethics programs. But he still had Mia. He still had their small apartment and their daily rituals and the ordinary magic of paper cranes promising protection. The essentials had survived the chaos, which meant he'd succeeded at the only mission that truly mattered. His phone buzzed with a final message from Agent Santos. "Wanted to let you know, last of the international warrants were executed today. Networks completely dismantled. You and Mia are officially clear, no remaining threats. Congratulations, Mr. Hart. You can actually rest now." Gavin read the message 3 times, letting it sink in. No remaining threats. Clear to live without security protocols and threat assessments and constant vigilance. Clear to just be a father, a contractor, a normal person doing normal things. He walked to Mia's room and looked in on her sleeping form, surrounded by her protective cranes, breathing steady and peaceful. Tomorrow, he'd tell her the good news. Tomorrow, They'd celebrate being truly safe for the first time since that morning in the hotel lobby. But tonight, he just stood guard the way he'd done since she was born, watching over his daughter's sleep, holding the line between the world's dangers and her dreams. Some jobs didn't end with operational success or threat neutralization. Some jobs lasted a lifetime, required daily recommitment, measured success in quiet breaths and peaceful sleep. Being Mia's father was the most important operation Gavin Hart would ever run, and he planned to execute it flawlessly for the rest of his life. 3 months later, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, Mia's school invited Gavin to finally give that talk about moral courage. He'd said yes this time, figuring that if his viral moment was going to follow him forever, he might as well use it to teach kids something worth knowing. He stood in Mrs. Rodriguez's classroom, looking at 30 fifth graders who were far more interested in whether he could teach them combat moves than in any lecture about ethics. Mia sat in the front row, looking both proud and mortified the way kids do when their parents invade their school space. "My daughter thinks I'm going to embarrass her," Gavin started, getting immediate laughter. "And she's probably right because parents are professionally embarrassing. But I'm going to talk about something that happened 6 months ago and what I learned from it. And maybe you'll find it useful, or maybe you'll just think about it later when something similar happens to you." He talked about seeing someone who needed help, about the moment of decision between looking away and stepping forward, about how courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite fear. He talked about boundaries and consent and the importance of listening when people said no. And he talked about consequences, about how one choice in one moment had cascaded into changes neither he nor anyone else had anticipated, how standing up had cost him privacy and normalcy, but it also saved lives and inspired programs that might prevent future harm. "The question you'll face," he told the kids, "isn't whether bad things happen. They do, constantly, everywhere. The question is what you do when you see those bad things happening. Do you look away because it's safer? Do you tell yourself it's not your problem? Or do you step forward, even when it's scary, even when it might cost you something because helping people matters more than staying comfortable?" A girl in the back raised her hand. "But what if stepping forward gets you hurt? What if the bad people come after you?" It was a fair question, the kind kids asked when adults tried to sell them simplified morality without acknowledging real dangers. "That's a real risk," Gavin acknowledged. "Sometimes helping people does cost you something. It cost me privacy when that video went viral. It cost me sleep worrying about whether my daughter was safe. It cost me the quiet life I'd built and wanted to keep. But you know what it gave me? The knowledge that when it mattered, when someone needed help, I was the kind of person who stood up. And that's worth more than comfort or safety or anonymity." Marcus, Mia's friend who'd been learning origami, raised his hand. "Is that why Mia makes paper cranes, to remind people to protect each other?" Gavin looked at his daughter, who was blushing but nodding. "Yeah, that's exactly why. Mia believes protection is a promise we make to people we care about. Her cranes are daily reminders that some promises are worth keeping even when they're hard." After the talk, kids swarmed Mia asking her to teach them crane folding, wanting to make their own protection promises. Mrs. Rodriguez thanked Gavin for being honest about consequences, rather than just selling heroism as cost-free. "Kids need to know that doing the right thing matters," she said, "but also that it's complicated and sometimes expensive. You gave them both halves of that truth. Thank you." Walking out of the school with Mia, watching her chatter excitedly about how Marcus had finally mastered the advanced wing fold, Gavin felt something settle in his chest that had been unsettled since that morning at the Aurelia. This was what the viral moment had cost and earned. His daughter proud instead of frightened, using her creativity to help others, learning that standing up was possible even when it was hard. "Did I embarrass you too much?" he asked. "A little, but the good kind of embarrassing, where I'm proud you're my dad even though you talked about feelings in front of my whole class." She slipped her hand into his. "Marcus wants to know if you can teach him some of the self-defense moves from the video. Not to fight people, just to know he could protect himself if he needed to." "That's a conversation I'd need to have with his parents. Self-defense training for kids is serious, needs proper context and supervision." That's what I told him. "But Dad, would you teach me? Not because I'm scared, but because knowing how to protect myself might make me less scared of being scared." The logic was quintessentially Mia, finding courage through competence, addressing fear by building capability. And it was a reasonable request from a kid who'd watched her father use controlled force to stop a threat, who understood that violence had tactical applications beyond aggression. We can talk about it. Maybe find a good program designed for kids your age, where they teach discipline and awareness along with technique. But Mia, I need you to understand something important. Learning to fight doesn't mean you're responsible for fighting. Sometimes the bravest thing is still asking for help, still letting adults handle adult problems. I know, but I want to know I could, if I had to. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, baby. Yeah, we'll find you a good program. That evening, Gavin sat down to draft a response to Elena's consulting offer. He'd spent 3 months thinking about it, discussing it with Mia, considering whether staying connected to the anti-trafficking work would help or hurt their journey back to normal. He decided it would help, not because he needed the money or the purpose, but because walking away completely would mean pretending the hotel lobby moment never happened, that the capabilities he'd developed in Nightfall were shameful rather than useful. Better to integrate his past with his present than to keep them artificially separated. His acceptance email was brief. I'll take the consulting contract with the boundaries we discussed. Remote work, no public appearances, focused on protocol development and training feedback. Mia's schedule and well-being remain top priority. Looking forward to working together. Gavin. Elena's response came within minutes. Welcome aboard. First consultation session scheduled for next month. And Gavin, thank you for trusting us with this. Your expertise will help a lot of people stay safe. The foundation work progressed steadily over the following year. The Protection Promise program expanded to 300 hotels across 40 countries. Gavin consulted remotely on training developments, reviewed security protocols, provided tactical feedback that improved intervention effectiveness. It was satisfying work that used his skills without consuming his life, that contributed to positive change without requiring him to become a public figure. Mia's crane designs evolved into a full curriculum of symbols, different colors for different types of boundaries, variations representing different aspects of ethical security work. She took serious pride in her contribution, understanding that her daily ritual had grown into something that helped strangers across the world. The viral video's view count eventually plateaued at 42 million, which was simultaneously incomprehensible and meaningless. Numbers that Large stopped feeling real, stopped connecting to the actual moment in the actual lobby where he'd made an actual choice to help an actual person. What mattered more were the letters that arrived periodically at the foundation office, victims of trafficking who'd been rescued because security personnel trained in the Protection Promise program recognized warning signs and intervened. Employees who'd reported harassment and been believed instead of dismissed. People whose lives had been materially improved because someone, somewhere, had learned that protection was a promise worth keeping. Gavin kept those letters in a folder separate from the fan mail and interview requests. These were the ones that mattered, the evidence that standing up in one lobby had created ripples that reached people he'd never meet in situations he'd never witness. On the first anniversary of the hotel lobby incident, Mia made a special crane from paper she'd decorated herself with hand-drawn stars and words of gratitude. It was beautiful and fragile and precisely folded, a masterwork of her evolving craft. "This one's for you to keep forever," she said, presenting it to him with ceremony. "Because 1 year ago you were brave in a way that changed everything. And I want you to remember that being brave was worth it, even when it was hard." Gavin accepted the crane with hands that trembled slightly, his throat tight with emotion. "I'll treasure it, sweet girl, forever." "I know you will. You keep all of them." She paused, then added, "Mom would be proud of you. Of both of us, I think. We took something really hard and made it mean something good." "Yeah, baby, we did." That night, Gavin placed the anniversary crane in a special box alongside Sarah's wedding ring and Mia's first crane and the crumpled yellow one from the morning at the Aurelia. These were the artifacts that mattered, the physical proof that love persisted through loss, that promises could be kept even when circumstances made keeping them costly. He thought about trajectories and choices and the difference between the man he'd been before that hotel lobby and the man he was now. Fundamentally, he was the same, still a father first, still choosing Mia's well-being over everything else, still believing some fights were worth fighting even when winning was expensive. But he'd learned something in the past year, something about the relationship between privacy and impact, between safety and purpose. You couldn't control how the world saw you or used your actions as symbols. You could only control whether those symbols were used for harm or help, whether your unwanted fame was channeled toward exploitation or protection. He'd chosen protection. For Mia, for Elena, for the strangers who'd benefit from training programs built on lessons learned in hotel lobbies. And that choice had cost him the quiet anonymity he'd craved, but had earned him something else. The knowledge that when history called, he'd answered in ways that mattered. 2 years later, Mia was 12 and teaching origami workshops at the local community center, using her crane folding skills to help younger kids process their own fears and traumas. She'd grown into her mother's compassion and her father's determination, becoming someone who believed in turning pain into purpose without being consumed by either. Gavin had settled into consultant work that balanced technical challenge with family priority, contributing expertise without sacrificing presence. The viral video had faded from trending topics, but persisted as a reference point in discussions about intervention and moral courage, a moment crystallized in digital amber that periodically resurfaced when the world needed reminding that individuals could make a difference. The threats were gone. The network was dismantled. The Protection Promise program had trained 30,000 security professionals across 6 continents. And most importantly, Mia was thriving, confident, creative, compassionate, growing into someone who would make her own choices about when to stand up and when to seek help. On an ordinary evening, 2 years and 3 months after that extraordinary morning, Gavin sat at their kitchen table helping Mia with algebra homework, while she simultaneously folded cranes with the kind of absent expertise that came from thousands of hours of practice. "Dad?" she said, not looking up from her equation. "I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" "The cranes I make every day. They started as promises that you'd stay safe. But you're always safe now. The bad people are gone, and I keep making them anyway. Do you think it's weird that I still need to?" Gavin considered the question carefully, understanding that she was asking about more than just origami ritual. She was asking whether healing meant abandoning coping mechanisms or integrating them into ongoing life. "I don't think it's weird at all," he said. "The cranes aren't just about keeping me safe from specific threats. They're about the daily promise that we matter to each other, that we're committed to protecting what we've built together. That doesn't stop being important just because the immediate danger is over. So it's okay if I keep making them forever, even when I'm grown up and have my own family?" "Sweet girl. If you're still making paper cranes when you're 50, I'll be honored that our daily ritual meant enough to last a lifetime." She smiled and returned to her homework, her hands continuing their automatic folding even as her mind worked through algebraic expressions. The cranes had become part of her, woven into her identity as deeply as her love for art or her inherited compassion. That was okay. That was healthy. That was the way trauma transformed into resilience instead of dissolving into pretense that hard things had never happened. Later that night, after Mia had gone to bed, Gavin stood at his window looking out at the city lights and thought about the past 2 years. The path from that hotel lobby to this moment had been neither straight nor simple, had cost him privacy and peace and pieces of himself he'd never fully recover. But he'd do it again. Every single choice, every tactical decision, every moment of stepping forward when stepping back would have been easier. Because the alternative was a world where Mia learned that saying no didn't matter, where vulnerable people could be cornered in lobbies while crowds looked away, where networks of exploitation operated with impunity because everyone was too afraid or too comfortable to intervene. And Gavin Hart, former Special Operations Ghost, current contractor and consultant, permanent father to one remarkable girl, refused to accept that world as inevitable. He pulled out his phone and sent a message to Elena. New training module idea, teaching kids about consent and boundaries starting in elementary school. Not just stranger danger, but everyday situations where their no matters and should be respected. Interested in developing curriculum? Her response came quickly. Absolutely. Let's discuss tomorrow. This could be transformative. Gavin smiled and put his phone away. Tomorrow, they'd develop training that might prevent future lobbies, future moments where someone needed rescue. Tomorrow, they'd build systems that made intervention normal rather than heroic. But tonight, he just stood in his small apartment where paper cranes covered every surface, where his daughter slept safely surrounded by her promises, where a man who'd been presumed dead had built a life worth living from ashes and determination and love that persisted through impossible loss. The yellow crane from that first morning was still in his pocket, permanently crushed but permanently cherished. And tomorrow morning, Mia would make him a new one, continuing the ritual that had started as fear and transformed into faith. If the crane stayed safe, he stayed safe. It was paper and promise and probably magical thinking. But sometimes, the most powerful protection was believing that someone cared enough to fold hope into wings every single day, and that the person receiving those wings would guard them like the treasures they truly were. Gavin Hart had been a lot of things in his life: operator, contractor, viral hero, foundation trustee. But the identity that mattered most, the role he'd guard until his last breath, was the simplest one of all. He was Mia's father. Everything else was just details. And in their small apartment filled with paper cranes and homework and the ordinary magic of daily life, that was more than enough. It was everything.